Welcome, everybody. It is the OCC Clash for June, Part 2. That's right, we had some slight technical difficult. Okay, maybe I'm underselling it by saying slight. We had a giant internet outage that unfortunately dropped the broadcast. So you may not have caught the entirety of our second feature quarter-final matchup. That match did take place off the stream, so we are up to date now. We have our top four who will still be competing for 500 US dollars and a maximum of 25 KARDS points, OCC points, to qualify for the OCC Ultimate. I am your host, Christo. I am joined by Darkness and Spooz. We have Bubbles, we have Starry, and we have Berto in the wings waiting for a few of our future matchups. But why don't we, let's do a little summary here. Let's get the bracket up so you all can get up to speed with where we are at. So there you see J King going over Ying 2-0 to be in our first quarterfinal as he defeating No in 2-0. They will be in the first semifinal going up against J King. Tang and Bezio is sort of where the wheels came off the rails as the first matchup, which was an absolute slog of 31 minutes and 47 seconds, a Soviet mirror matchup. I believe most of you should have seen Tang winning that match. Bezio came back to win game 2 with their Jagro list, and then Tang finishes up the series winning with US Frontline in game 3. Moving on to the second semifinal here with Ziyang defeating newcomer Top Chef 2-0 going into the bottom of that semifinal. So those are your four competitors you're going to see here competing for that crown of the OCC Clash champion for June. Our first matchup today is going to be Tang versus Ziyang, but before we get there, maybe just a quick follow-up on that matchup that we kind of saw half of, where Tang took on Bezio. 31 minutes and 47 seconds for a Soviet mirror. Darkness, are you entirely surprised by that?
I mean, I'm surprised to see matches like that on this broadcast in the OCC, because it's right now it's not really the control matters. This was like 2 years or 2.5 years ago. I remember when the broadcasts lasted with pre-show preparation like 10 hours. The one time I had to start early the next day on a Sunday, and we had a lot of these matches going after midnight for European time. So I'm not surprised that those control mirror matchups can take a lot of time, and actually 30 minutes is kinda okay compared to a resistance mirror matchup going over 1 hour. I think I just triggered PTBS and Spooz here. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised that we are actually seeing these matches right now in this meta.
Spooz, to Darkness's point, isn't entirely typical for the meta to see something like that. As this tournament goes on, obviously Tang moved through with the Soviet list. Do we expect to see more of these marathon matches, or do you think the matchups will probably move a little bit quicker? We still see some Jagger out there. We're still seeing some frontlines, some Brit Air and things of the like.
I mean, it all depends a little bit on the bans. A lot of players bring at least one control deck in this tournament. So yeah, if the chances are there that if both players are not banning the other one's control list and both are queuing into each other, then we just have what we just saw yesterday, matches that take over half an hour. While it's a cool mix-up and you just see the full strategic potential of cards in those matches, more like in aggressive decks where people mostly just play their hand and try to do the best with this, it just uses way more brain power and way more planning of your strategy in those matches. And I think it's a cool mix-up. But yeah, honestly, I don't want to have too much of those. It's really exhausting, first to watch, because you also just want to keep track of what is happening, and also to cast, because you don't know what happened 20 minutes ago, what cards are out of the game. You really have to invest a lot of brain power into this to keep track what is still possible for each player. And so 1 or 2 matches of this is okay, but let's please not have a tournament meta where we have 15 matches of those.
It's funny, Spooz, as you were talking about, like it uses more brain power. You just see Darkness sitting there with a big smile on his face, like, yes, love the
I
strategy.
love those. I love those, definitely. I think it's very boring to see everyone bringing J aggro, Brit Air, and frontline, and every matchup is the same from the bans and from the matches, and you're just figuring out who's the best pilot of those decks and who's bringing the better RNG and drawing the better cards in the best solutions, in the best times. To see diverse decks with OTK, with control, with anti-aggro, with discard, with and of course the regular stuff. It's just so much more interesting to follow. And of course, my heart is I do love control decks. I do love to think about what happened 20 minutes ago and how this is affecting the current match. So I'm looking forward to it and hoping we see at least one more of those.
Well, let's dive into this first matchup then and see exactly what we are expecting here. We didn't get through all of the player cards yesterday, obviously, with a few players playing off stream. So we have Tang Tang versus Ziyang going up here first. I don't believe we took a look at Ziyang's player profile, so why don't we bring it up here just to get to know Ziyang a little bit better. 480 matches, 78.50% win rate. Season finish of third, so coming in the top half here of our qualifiers. We did go back and scrape the archives once more, and I do believe that the highest win rate, as we discussed yesterday, was actually J King in January's OCC, winning a whopping 84.03% of his matches, which is absolutely wild, but 78.5%, nothing to shake a stick at. Why don't we continue with Ziyang here and bring up the deck list? Spooz, why don't you walk us through what Ziyang is playing here today?
Yeah, Ziyang, the player that just defeated Top Chef yesterday in the first round of the OCC Top 8, brings a pretty interesting lineup here with two discard decks, starting with the German Britain discard deck, a deck that, we've seen it a few times in the past months, and whenever we just saw it in action, we just see the potential how annoying this deck can be. Cards like Wolfpack, Case Yellow, Annihilation, really, really strong in the current meta with that German frontline, for example, a good target for the Annihilation, or the Shermans, for example. So both discard decks, the Brit German deck, in my opinion, maybe a little bit stronger, because you just have the strong control tools like Monty and Shelling in it, plus the discard package. You don't really have a win condition, but honestly, one Lancaster or one Churchill on the board can win you the game if you can just keep your opponent's hand size at almost 0, so he cannot really do anything about this unit. And that makes that deck so annoying. And then we have a very interesting Japan-Britain control style deck with a lot of AoE in it. Also not really a win condition. It's mostly targeting all those aggressive ground unit based decks like the frontline deck or the Jagger deck. It has just stuff like fortification to heal yourself back up, and then all the imaginable AoE in the game, like the supply shortage. You have Tora in it. So much AoE, and that's combined with stuff like Kawanishi or is there last rites in it. That is just kind of your win condition. You try to just wipe your opponent's board while constantly shipping down its HQ health, and hopefully this will give you the winning play in the end there. Finished.
Christo, are you muted again?
Did we lose his Christo?
I am absolutely muted again. I coughed and I muted myself, and that went well. So, Darkness, we've got Tang Tang's list up here. Why don't you walk us through them?
Sure. Well, Tang Tang His first deck is the well-known US-German frontline deck. This deck is very straightforward and aggressive. You have a lot of 1 and 2 credit units. You want to get them as fast as possible into the frontline and capitalize on that, for example, with the 99th Infantry Battalion or the Sherman or the Blitzkrieg to get additional tempo and value out of it. His second deck is the current meta deck, the Brit Air. Brit main nation and Japan side nation. It uses the very cheap airplanes of Britain, the Swordfish and the Gladiator, with 1 credit deployment cost, 1/3 stats, and the buff Close Air Support. This buff is a +1/+1 onto a British air unit, and also +1/+1 on adjacent units. So you can stabilize your support line very quickly and dominate with some buffed bombers the early and mid game and gain a lot of control and snowball into your victory, basically. This is what makes this deck very powerful right now. And his third deck is the deck that faced a mirror match. And this was the 30-minute plus game from yesterday. This is Soviet control with some ramp mechanics from US ally. So the War Machine will give you in the early game more credits to work with in the mid game, or after the mid game, when you reach the 12 credit cap, you are enabling 13, 14, 15, 16 credits. And then you have all of the powerful, valuable cards from the Soviet Union together with some very spicy US cards like 5th Rangers, Mobilization, We Can Do It, and the B-17 Flying Fortress to work with, what makes this deck a super value deck in Tank's lineup.
Right on. We do have the bans, so let's find out exactly what these players are going to be wielding in this matchup. So it seems like Ziyang has no interest in going through another control marathon, having banned Tang's Soviet control list, and Ziyang is going to lose access to that Brit Germany. I guess you called it a discard deck, Spooz?
A discard.
Yeah, the more annoying one of the 2 discard decks.
Is the fact that Ziyang is playing some typical, like a little bit slower list the reason why I wanted to go and ban something like Tang's Soviet list, figuring that, hey, the fast stuff's gonna get locked down?
100%. Ziyang's entire deck lists, his entire lineup is focused on to beat J aggro, to beat like those ground-based, fast, aggressive decks. And with those control mechanics like Tora or Fortification and a lot of small removal, you're not gaining anything against the control ramp deck of Tang. So this deck of Tang has no problems in winning against any deck from Ziyang. So this is the reason why Ziyang had to ban it. Very good choice here. Brit Air actually could be a little bit difficult by its pure strengths right now to win with for Ziyang, especially since some of his removals in his Japan decks are just against ground units and not dealing enough damage against those fighters. So could be still difficult for him to win against Brit Air. I think the most interesting deck the most interesting match we are about to see is the US Frontline deck from Tang against Xiang, because this will be tough and critical for Tang to win with against this lineup. But Tang is one of the strongest cards veterans out there, so it won't be easy for Xiang.
Spooz, is that kind of your read on this as well? It's going to depend on if Tang can get that frontline list through kind of the barrage that Xiang is playing that's going to kind of directly counter it for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I completely agree that it makes completely sense to get rid of Tank's Soviet US deck. Like, this AoE deck has small AoE, but not really any big amount of hard removal. So we just saw yesterday what big units Tank can slam down later in the game, and all these guards also preventing Xiang's fighters to ever reach the HQ. So that makes perfectly sense. And yeah, as we just saw, or as I said earlier, Top Chef lost yesterday against Xiang with this lineup, and Top Chef kind of bringing a similar deck with Brit Air and US Germany. And I think, yeah, Xiang is definitely having a good shot here today in just advancing to the finals.
Well, let's get into it. Here's our first semifinals for the June OCC Clash.
Yeah, we just start with a matchup that we mentioned, Frontline against this AoE heavy deck. So let's see how this goes.
It's very interesting. Tank is going first. Usually this is beneficial for the frontline deck, but there's nothing to work with.
Not with this hand. Look at this.
No.
Only the Hellcat on turn 3 playable.
Even
Is forced to push up the 109th.
Well, Archie is being played by Xiang, but Patrol is actually really good. It not only kills the unit, but disables the destruction effect. So Patrol would just get rid of it. That's a nice trade. And Tank can attack for 1 damage also, or use the half track. Send back, remove the 2 credits value being played by Xiang from the game and enabling a small tank. Looks like Patrol it is for Tank.
Yeah, probably wants to keep the half deck for later. He knows that Xiang has a lot of guards additionally in the deck, like the 61st. And it could be more value to bounce them later, but I would have also loved to see the half track here. Bounce it back gives you a body on the board that benefits from the 109s, and it's just a little bit more credit efficient. But
yeah, the Riding Brigade will get rid of the Engineers Battalion, but the Engineers Battalion did its job. It already attacked, so there's some value for Tank out of it. And now with the Rangers in the front line, the half track really comes in place, removing this unit back to hand, 4 credits wasted by Xiang, and Tank is able to deal 4 damage to the HQ, or trade if he is really interested in that. Dealing more damage here. Looking quite strong with the Wirbelwind on top. Xiang has to start to deal some damage to those units, but he's still waiting a little bit and playing the guard again. 99th Infantry Regiment coming in could either buff the Wirbelwind to trade and survive, or the 5th Rangers to trade and survive against this guard. Or he could even drop the Sherman to get more units. Very difficult decision here.
yeah, I think what Tank should be aiming to do is to keep his high HP units untouched and just trade with the smaller units, then because those are not too much affected by the AoE and don't die instantly. But Tank just deciding to buff the Wirbelwind here and yeah, let Xiang do the move, it looks like, because this 61st has 2 operation cost, and it will cost 1/3 of Xiang's credits for next turn if he wants to trade with it. 2 credits still to spend here.
Yeah, look at that. Usually you would trade with the Wirbelwind to make everyone survive. But Tank realizes there's so much 1 damage, like Torah supply. No, what is? Supply shortage. The Empire strikes, that it's better to actually trade and lose the 4/4 unit. And there are 2 supply shortages. The smaller units instantly dead, and even the Whirlwind won't survive that long.
I mean, he has 6 damage on board, which is... Oh no, even more with the Hellcat. It's 8 damage, he's just 1 off.
It's a lot of damage.
Looks like he's...
He's playing those little units. Of course, all of them will die, but Tank played all of them to get these out of the deck. So when he plays the Sherman next turn, in case he can't finish the Yang with the Hellcat, he won't get another 32nd infantry regiment out of it. Actually a very smart move to just drop all 3.
Oh, that's also a smart move here. He could clear the board with the Siren into Tora, and the Raiding Brigade goes into the Whirlwind. But that was just give Tank lethal next turn with a Hellcat or any other Blitz tank. So pretty smart move here. Although
As
Wait, why not?
Whirlwind will die. There are 2 supply shortage debuffs onto it. Now Tank could attack with the Hellcat, but he can better save that for later. Just send the 5th Rangers into the front line and use the Sherman. This is a draw power I was talking about earlier. Another Sherman and we can do it. It's not getting easier for Xiang here to stay alive.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the downside of this Japan deck. If your opponent is playing units that have a little bit more health, you have to spend so much resources, and then you don't have too much
Yeah.
draw in this deck. And this is the situation where Ziyang is in now. Sure, he has Siren, Tora, but this is only 2 damage to all units. You can also go Siren into the Empire Strikes, which would be 3 damage.
3. It's still not killing anything.
Yeah. He's looking for another bomber, probably. The 2-credit elite bomber from Japan for next turn, but did not really find it. And
that is not
2 off strat bombing.
not enough.
1 credit off.
No, Tank has lethals. There's a Hellcat.
Oh
in
yeah, he
his
still has
hand.
5 credits left. Yeah, the Hellcat. I thought it would not
And-
be enough credits, but it was.
Exactly enough credits for Tank to finish the first match and winning with his frontline deck. It really came down to small decisions, like sending the combat engineer into the front, gaining 1 extra damage, trading the 4/4 5th Rangers to make the Whirlwind more sticky, just 1 extra HP. These nuances were very brilliant by Tank the first match. So he already won with the most critical match for him. He got the frontline deck through. And now he has at least 2 tries to win with Brit Air. What should be possible in theory.
Absolutely should be. And as you just said, Tank really abused the weakness of this Japan deck with, units that have a little bit more health than 1 or 2. And therefore, Tank in the 1-0 lead now with Brit Air. And again, not the best starting hand here. Not 1 single airplane in hand in the first 7 or 6 cards. Or 5 cards, another one.
But there's a convoy in his hand, and Xiang is playing discard. So Tank is very happy to get more cards to catch up a little bit because Tank is going first. I personally hate going first against discard because of the 2 cards disadvantage.
Absolutely. And Xiang also with a very heavy hand here. A lot of 5 drops found in the first 3 rounds here. So both players with a very slow start here. That V1 flying bomb will get rid of anything that is coming probably there from Tank.
I think Tank is baiting out the V1 flying bomb. The Kitty Hawk is expensive to operate, so he's offering a target like here. I give you that. Use your 0 credit removal, and then I will play and buff my bombers to attack you.
What do you choose here? Yeah, I won't say the fortification probably really good against.
Yeah, I think fortification is super important here. Personally, maybe I would be a little bit more greedy with the wolf pack, because Brit Air is able to run out of cards, and without enough options, it just runs out of steam. Well, but Tang Tang has so many cards, it's hard to get rid of all of them. Not knowing what they are, that could be like 2 land leases. So fortification is the safe choice, definitely.
Yeah, I just love how both players are just almost the complete opposite credit-wise. Tang Tang just found all the cheap stuff in his deck, and Ziyang all the 5 and 6 and 7 drops.
Yeah,
We will
so
see which strategy will
expensive.
work out better, huh?
Well, Tang Tang, HMS, Illustrious, plus close air support, buffing all of them, attacking, moving the tank to the front, dealing 5 damage here. Finally, a cheap card appeared. But I don't know.
Yeah, what to do? You want to? I mean, I think you can wait a little bit with the fortification and just trade out
Just
the
to get
2/2
rid
in the
of one
front
bomber, I
line.
think it's very important. It's not credit efficient, but you have to kill a bomber and to kill the 2/2 tank.
Tang Tang with another close air support in hand. We might see it right now, played on these 3 air units.
Close air support on 3 different air units. It's so efficient.
Supply shortage is not really helpful here at all.
I think it
You know.
is actually, because it's efficient. You gotta play fortification
Yeah, but
and
it's only
supply
killing the
shortage.
Type 94, and sure, the fortification can give you +7 to get back to 13, buys you a turn. And yeah, on the other hand, Tang Tang is also running out of stuff a little bit.
Yeah, Tang Tang is running out of stuff, so healing up and getting the supply shortage rolling is the only real option for Xiang here, but it's getting close. And it's getting even closer.
Another swordfish being found here.
7 damage coming in. Another bomber is dropped. Air superiority gets rid. A Flampanzer.
Flampanzer is.
But a Flampanzer is
Is he
not
not
enough.
right now? Right now it is, right?
Flampanzer can kill 1 unit, but so can Annihilation while getting rid of 1 card. You can't play anything else with the Flampanzer, so it's... Why wouldn't Xiang just play the Annihilation?
I
And
think he wants
get
to
rid
have
of
the body on board, but I agree.
Buddy.
Annihilation in this situation probably would have been better.
You can, if you operate the Flampanzer, this is 4 credits, and the next turn 8, there's nothing with 4 or less. There's no option for Xiang, so I stick to my point. Annihilation would be much better.
Tang Tang 1 damage off, not really finding an order here that can close out the game. So would it make sense to play the second Piracy on one of the bombers and trade out the Flampanzer, or just go full face?
Sorry, I'm still thinking about the Flampanzer Annihilation dilemma.
I mean,
maybe the body is still better because it forces Tang Tang to either use the 2 surprise attacks, and this way he would get rid of 2 cards, like Xiang would get rid of 2 cards in the hand of Tang Tang. Or he forces to attack. Tang Tang chooses a different option, and this different option is just pinning the Flampanzer. Very smart move.
That's it, right?
The U-88 will block all the bombers.
Yeah, but there's still a fighter, so I think there's no out here for
and
the,
options to remove. Yeah, that's it. There's... No, there wouldn't be.
It was just too dominant here from Tang Tang.
Casefire could have drawn another card, but there is even root out wouldn't be enough credits possible. So yeah, that is Tang Tang played flawless, and well, I think he deserved the 2-0 here. Very well played.
I think we brought it up before the matchup, right? That Ziyang maybe has a little bit of a head start here based on the lineup and the bans and all that. But I think Darkness, you brought it up perfectly, right? Tang Tang is experienced, been around the block, seen this before, dealt with these matchups, prepped well, and played flawlessly. And even with an awkward start in that second game, right? No bombers, no fighters, no nothing in their hand. But Ziyang also ended up with a hand that cost 5 or more. So sometimes you are a bit at the mercy of the cards, but I think to your point, Tang Tang absolutely deserves to go through. Will be our first finalist, and we'll be competing here for $250. Now, before I let the two of you go, I wanted to get to our first reveal for Brothers in Arms, the expansion launching on June 27th, and I picked a very special one for the two of you because I don't know that I can pronounce the name properly. And instead of making a fool of myself, I would have the two of you go ahead and pronounce this German card for us. So, Marcius, can you bring this sucker up on screen? There you have it. Spooz, why don't you start by walking us through this card, especially with the name?
Yeah, honestly, I really want to hear yourself making a fool out of yourself by just pronouncing it.
I was gonna go Schützen.
Yeah, that was close. It's the siebte, so 7th Schützen. So it means, yeah, a really cool German infantry, to be honest here. A 4-5 infantry unit with Blitz, which is really important. We don't have too many veteran-style Blitz cards yet. And when this becomes veteran when it attacks and destroys a unit. And what is really cool about the veteran ability, once the unit becomes veteran, it will just regain the stats from the veteran variant. So, for example, this is a very good counter to stuff like 5th Rangers, the 4-4 US infantry guy, or a Sherman. If you blitz into a Sherman with this, you are not left with a 4-1. No, you will get a 5-5. The Sherman will be dead. And additionally, since this unit became veteran, you will deal 3 damage to the enemy HQ. I think the effect is not the most important thing about this, but I love the 5 health on it. And yeah, just when it becomes veteran, it kind of heals himself up, gives himself 1 more attack, and you're left with a 5-5 body, which is pretty strong.
This is very powerful. And I love the artwork.
Yeah, it's really one of the better veteran units that we've seen so far. As I said, Blitz is so important in cards right now because you want to have instant effect out of your cards. We don't see any infantry unit played that don't give you, first of all, a really strong effect overall, have guard, or anything else. I think the other veteran units are fine, but I think they're kind of too slow. You don't want to play a 4-3 that you cannot move this turn. Your opponent can bounce it, remove it, and you wasted 4 credits. This card gives you instant effect, plus the very strong veteran effect. Really cool card, and I love to see, or I love to, just play it in the future. Not too long in the future, only 10 days, 9 days.
Yeah.
Christo.
Muted again.
I don't even. I got to stop touching things. Are you, Derek? Does you agree the main draw for this card, the main advantage for this card is the fact that it's got kind of that immediate impact. So you can drop it, you can blitz it, you can actually do something with it and get value out of it immediately.
Yeah, definitely. The blitz effect by itself is strong. Like Spooz mentioned, the 5th Ranger right now is very popular. But there are other cards like who love to be in the front line, like the 4-2 Hellcat, maybe even the Sherman, or against the frontline deck, basically anything buffed by the combat engineers, +1 or +2 damage. And this card is super strong playing into those. So I'm at least expecting them in similar German frontline or tank decks, or maybe even in the frontline deck to take a little bit against the mirror matchup. To be able to, yeah, you can play this as an ally as well. And this effect is so strong. You remove one unit out of the front line, you get 5/5 stats for 4 credits, and you deal 3 damage to your opponent HQ. This is like a wonder box. It got everything.
Absolutely, and you're going to be able to use it in just under 10 days when the Brothers in Arms expansion launches. We have 3 more cards to spoil after our next 3 matches, but first a quick break before we get to our second semifinal of J King versus Ozzy. Welcome back, everybody. It is time for our second semifinal. I am joined by Starry and by Berto. We got J King versus Ozzy up next. I appreciate the enthusiastic waves from both of you. J King going up against Ozzy. Winner goes on to the finals to face Tang Tang. Loser moves on to the bronze match where they will go up against Z Young. We've got we've taken a look at both these players' decks. We've seen J King's player card. Let's get to know Ozzy a little bit better and bring up Ozzy's card. Didn't really get to take a look at it yesterday as they competed in our quarterfinal that was set up a little bit behind the scenes here. So as Markthius gets to pushing the buttons and bringing up there we have it. Ozzy finishing 5th, 72% win rate, 558 total matches. So again, we're seeing these players become more and more efficient at what they're doing when they are competing. We don't see these 1,000 matches played or anything like that. Sticking with Ozzy, why don't we get into the deck list? Berto, can you walk us through Ozzy's lineup here in this second semifinal?
Sure thing. So from Ozzy, we see a pure unitless US France deck, which really targets control decks, but is also quite strong against things like air. And next up, we have a Japan USA OTK deck. This deck uses things like Hyen and Tony, these blitz fighters with bolster the ranks and burst of fire to come out with huge damage right from hand. And lastly, we have a Britain-Germany control and discard deck. A little different to what we just saw in the last match, without running any sudden strikes, without running any flame panzers, which makes this deck a little bit better against control and a little bit worse against aggro.
So we see some control, we see some unitless, we see some OTK on Ozzy's side. Starry, what's J King bringing to the table?
Well, J King's first deck, we've already seen. Sorry, the order here. I'm going to start with J King's Siberian Transfer OTK. It is a deck that we've seen a couple of times, but it's pretty rare to see it at this kind of level. But you know, sending off this meta, this format, wishing it a goodbye, right? So it's a really fun deck. It's looking to combo your opponent out with Ura and Siberian Transfer to hit for a lot of damage in one turn. And then, of course, we have the pretty standardized Jagro list at this point. This Japan Germany Jagro. It's really common, and we've actually seen the exact same list from other players in this tournament. And lastly, we have a Germany Italy control, which is great for preying on air and allows itself to stay in the game with stuff like Mare Nostrum, while simultaneously wiping the board with root out and stuff like this. Again, this list is pretty homogenized at this point. And yeah, let's get to the game.
Let's get to the game. Before that, let's take a look at the bands and see exactly what we have here. So J King not getting access to his aggro list, whereas Ozzy's Brit Germany discard deck gets banned here. Berto, jumping in first with you. What's your take on these bans?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is we're finally going to get to see this Siberian Transfer OTK. We saw it get banned out last set that J King was playing in, and now we finally get to see it. And against US and Japan, that seems like two pretty decent matchups for the deck to work its magic. Get some juicy Scorched Earths played, hitting a bunch of units, maybe locking down a back line or a front line. We'll see how that pans out. And I'm not surprised to see discard banned when you are running Siberian Transfer, just because if you get Siberian Transfer taken out, you lose an Ura to this discard, you are pretty much out of the game, depending on what the discard might hit.
And Starry, so I get the discard ban. Jagro feels like, based on, Ozzy's kind of Unitless deck, some of the OTK, like more control stuff. You figure Jaggro shouldn't be too much of a problem, or am I missing the mark there?
Well, we have this always ban Brits, always ban Brit Air sort of mantra at this point. But when Brit Air is not in the lineup, Jaggro is probably one of the most consistent decks. And as we said yesterday, it's really hard to win 2 games against Jaggro. So it in my mind is almost it's like the second deck that has to go after Brit Air, right? So
So is it fair enough to just say, hey, I'm going with whatever the most powerful deck is, I'm just going to ban that, and it just pecking order goes Brit Air, Jaggro, frontline maybe after that if all else fails.
yeah, it's just a really consistent deck, and it's a solid ban choice.
Berto, if we end up seeing some like OTK mirror shenanigans, is one of the two decks kind of, I guess, faster or have more flexibility or versatility in popping off the combo before the other between the that Tony OTK and the Soviet OTK J King's bringing?
Yeah, so the Soviet OTK, it has more options to delay your opponent, but it needs more specific pieces. Like it only has one copy of Siberian Transfer, whereas the high-end Tony OTK, it has 5 copies of those fighters, and it has 2 copies of Burst of Fire. It has, I believe, 3 copies of Bolster the Ranks, maybe 2. So it just has an easier time finding the pieces, and it's also able to ramp into killing your opponent earlier. So I think in that OTK matchup, I think that the Japan US Tony OTK is quite heavily favored.
Just having more of the pieces, easier accessibility. What about this unitless deck, Starry? You've got this unitless kind of lineup that or list that Ozzy's bringing. Is there something specific against J King's list that it's going to excel against, or any struggle that it might run into, just in the fact that it has no real board presence?
Well, one problem with Siberian OTK is that its hand becomes crowded really quickly because you're often holding these pieces like Final Push and Ura in your hand until you get an opportunity to use them. And Unitless obviously preys on decks that do keep a large max hand size. However, the ability to burst out damage with Siberian Transfer does make me a little uncertain as to who is favored. So
Is it just a question of collecting a bunch of cards in hand and, J King maybe not even having a way to use them? So it just kind of sits there and drawing through?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're playing several copies of Final Push, yeah, it can get to be a very crowded hand very quickly.
One of the key cards in that matchup, particularly, I find, is Great Patriotic War. Because if that card gets milled, then all of a sudden you do have no way to get through all the healing from this unitless deck.
Could that matchup be just a whole heck of a lot of draw, pass, draw, pass?
I would
It
say
could
so.
be, and even a lot of using cards like Scorched Earth just to play it out of your hand, even though there's nothing on the board.
Well, here we go. We're getting into our second semi-final. Stay tuned afterwards. We will have another card reveal for you before we go into our bronze matchup.
Here in the mulligan, we can see J King is actually holding Decisive Defense in hand, which won't be useful for a long time. However, once it becomes useful, it could be one of the most important cards in his deck to be able to survive this OTK. This Decisive Defense, it could be healing up to 10 damage from a Tony with a Burst of Fire and a Bolster the Ranks on it.
I find it really interesting that Ozzy chose to keep that Bolster the Ranks in their opening hand, looking for an early OTK, it looks like. It looks like Ozzy is trying to accelerate the game as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think J King at some point is going to be able to find enough healing off of these Mary Nostrums that the OTK won't be enough damage. And with the discard in J King 7's deck, it can become quite scary for Azzy. So I think holding lots of OTK pieces in the hand and just trying to get an early jump on dealing that damage makes a lot of sense here for Azzy.
Well, we find that Ozzy has several combo pieces at this point. There is a Burst of Fire, there is a Vulture to the Ranks, and there is a Hien. Together, that would allow Ozzy to do 18 damage, if I counted correctly.
Let me let me count up myself. Yeah, that yep, that would be 18 damage,
And it
which
looks
is
like,
very scary.
yeah, and with this Aichi on the board, it doesn't look like it's going to be able to trade nicely into that Panzer, but it might be that extra couple of points of damage early in the game, so that later in the game, this Hien does manage to be an OTK with only 18 damage.
Yeah, and that key is an issue for J King to deal with. If you don't guard up, if you don't do anything to remove this key or deal with it in any way, that could be 16 damage coming out from Ozzy, if he so chooses, with Bolster the Ranks and Burst of Fire.
So J
So-
King is guarding up, making sure that it's harder to get that OTK. Debating whether or not to play From the Deep. Do you think J King has any suspicions about what might be coming out of Ozzy's hand next turn?
Well, I think it does make sense for him to hold From the Deep, simply because it's one of the most important cards in this deck to stop the combos from coming down, with Hien specifically. Although the card Tony does get around this effect, because it actually comes down not being deployed. But oh, and Azzy just going for it already. That's very interesting.
Although Ozzy is burning those combo pieces early, because J King is at 11, it will be easier for Hien to get in and finish off. And additionally, when we have Honor, that Ozzy could play on the Aichi and Bombing Raid, being at an 11 health is pretty uncomfortable for J King.
Yes, but the one saving grace is at least there's only one Burst of Fire left in Ozzy's deck.
Case Yellow does hit the Bombing Raid, which makes the 8-point health total a little bit safer, but definitely not comfortable. Being able to hold up the From the Deep will make it so that if Ozzy does decide to go for a Hien or something like that, instead, baiting out the From the Deep to get both a draw and to be card and credit efficient.
And shaking, we can see has two comets in hand. One of them, of course, coming out of this Africa core.
We can see that with Empire of the Sun, we can see why Panzer is so good. Panzer is one of the most common targets for Mare Nostrum because it allows J King or the Panther user to heal up really efficiently while avoiding any sort of removal. It would be really difficult to use AoE damage to deal 5 damage to something. It's quite uncommon.
And we do see Azzy here opting to play around decisive defense rather than going for the potential lethal. He, of course, doesn't know for a fact that J King has this in hand. I believe J King only plays one copy of the card. But with Mare Nostrum presumably coming down this turn to heal 7, well, still a lot of damage out of Azzy's hand. This is 9 and 3, so this is 12 damage in Ozzy's hand at the moment. But
Yeah,
if he's
if
not dealing with the Mare Nostrum unit, that's 7 healing each turn. Sorry, I cut you off, Starry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. So often when you're playing against this Tony OTK deck, late in the game, often it comes down to singular health total points, being it, 16 versus 15 or 19 versus 18. And so if Ozzy can stop J-King at 15, Ozzy is still very much in the game, but it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that. And I do worry for their ability to get back in the game once J-King goes to 22. 22 is a really, really big health point total, and to realistically deal enough damage, Ozzy is going to need that burst of fire at this point.
Yeah, and I do think that Ozzy does need to play this out to trade with the Panford G, just because most of his removal is targeted in the deck. We see this Empire of the Sun, which he would love to play on this Panford G, but he's just not able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal play to spend a Hien and an Honor on that, but what would be even less ideal is to let that Panther keep smacking you in the face.
J-King doesn't really have any way to play any cards in his hand without overdrawing next turn. Of course, both the Comets return to hand, and the Panzer III-H draws another card out of 3. There's no sudden strike targets. There's no Admiral Hipper targets. Research doesn't have any targets, and if you develop it, that's still a card in hand. The Case Yellow's cycle. So, yeah, he's
Are
just
there
going to discard a card,
are there any
presumably.
important overdraws for J-King at this point? I think that with the inevitable lethality of having not one but 2 Comets, J-King does seem to be pretty good on resources, and I'm not sure that there's anything in J-King's deck that's super important not to overdraw.
Yeah, that's true. The only thing would be like the third Mare Nostrum would be really a really nice pickup, but it's certainly not a necessary pickup for J-King. And
Going
this
for
is
an
interesting. Not
Annihilation.
going for the JU, which would have set up lethal if J-King so chose, and it also wouldn't have overdrawn him. But I suppose he's thinking at this point he doesn't really care so much if he overdraws.
I really like this play from Ozzy. It's credit efficient. It gives you the cards needed to get back in the game, and it allows you to curve out into a 61st Infantry.
Yeah, and this is a lot of draw on the board for Ozzy. With these recons and with the 61st Infantry in hand. And if he can find that last burst of fire, then all of a sudden he has a chance again.
Yeah, it looks like Ozzy did not go for my play, but opting instead for ramping to make it easier to do multiple things in a turn and also OTK. having the ability to do more on the inevitable OTK turn.
J-King keeps holding up these countermeasures to try to prevent damage, as he does know the 2 countermeasures left in J-King's deck, so he can be pretty confident that with these 2 credits up, J-King is holding up 2 copies of Careless Talk.
Yeah, Ozzy has a lot of mid-sized units. All of these Japanese fighters are somewhere from the 4 defense to 5 defense, or sorry, like 3 defense to 5 defense range. So basically, the next thing that Ozzy plays, which won't be anything, was going to get double Careless Talked.
Yeah, and a pretty clean game from both players. I think they both did everything they could that game, but we saw a bit of how discard is a really powerful option, and how Mare Nostrum as well is a really powerful option into this OTK deck.
Yeah, just like J King banned Brit discard to um, to make sure that the Soviet OTK does not get its essential pieces removed. Ozzy, unfortunately, was seeing what it looks like to be playing OTK and be really low on resources and be struggling to not get your pieces, your important OTK pieces removed.
Oh, and here we're getting the OTK mirror match. This might be a long one, folks.
Yes, and it might be one of the most interesting ones. I think this is a treat that we really rarely get to see. And I love that both players are bringing creative stuff, bringing fun stuff, and wishing the format a great goodbye. J-King has a lot of draw in that opening hand, and Ozzy has some ramp, some combo pieces. It's looking really nice.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if J-King loses by the sword here, simply because your opponent doesn't need to play out a lot of units in this matchup. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that looks like what it'll be.
the only thing that I'm concerned about is we're already seeing combo pieces that are going to sit in hand. We have Final Push, Ura, and Great Patriotic War, with J-King's 2 remaining cards being draw. And I am concerned that J-King is going to start approaching that hand size limit rather quickly.
Yeah, especially with Azzy being able to deny credit shortly with the Suffering plan. Although we begin to see quite a few burnable cards, so to speak, from J-King here, with this Bryansk regulars and with this tactical retreat. I don't think that's the name of the card. The card that retreats the front line.
Yeah, it's often pretty common to see in Soviet, in Siberian Transfer OTK, to see burning cards like Scorched Earth, like that retreat card, and it's honestly not a huge deal. It from an observer standpoint, it can be kind of unsettling to watch somebody throw away their hand so rapidly, but I do have a little bit of experience playing Siberian OTK, and I find that it's pretty easy to throw away your hand if necessary.
Yeah, and Azzy putting on the pressure really quick, not even looking for all of these combo pieces, which I think makes a lot of sense because J-King does not have a lot of answers to these air units. It's all about stall, it's not really about removal, and these Scorched Earths, they can even become a bit of a liability when your opponent is playing Bolster.
That is very true. Ozzy doesn't, yeah, as you said, there's really not a whole lot of removal going on in J-King's deck. Often those Bryansk regulars are the way that they stall out the game long enough to survive. But unfortunately, as you said, Scorched Earth is a bit of a liability, and the Bryansk regulars are not going to be able to stand being hit by those fighters, as they only deal 3 damage on death, and most of these fighters have 4 health.
All right, Azzy going right to the Bolster. Understandable.
Yeah.
He could have even used it on the 332nd in the front line to increase his damage output by a lot, although that would be it a lot weaker into delaying tactics.
Do you think that J-King was weighing all of the risks involved with Scorched Earth? I mean, it seems to me like you can Scorched Earth and potentially stall the game quite effectively, or put yourself in a really dangerous position, and sometimes there are essential risks that have to be taken. Do you think that this was a time where an essential risk had to be taken?
Yeah, absolutely. With double Scorched Earth in hand, how can you not play either of them? And is this enough here from J-King? He has It goes to 8 attack, it goes to 11 attack, it goes to 14 attack. This is... And he has the credits, he has exact credits. This is lethal here from Jaking.
Impressive, and just demonstrating the ability for OTK to win from the back foot. Honestly, either player can win from the back foot, but it's really cool to see what, if you don't know what deck Jaking is playing, a completely losing position turned around in 1 second like that.
Yeah, and I think a huge punish for moving up the 332nd into the front line, giving Jaking the ability to spend 2 less credits and to trade into a 2 defense unit to be able to pull off his combo effectively.
I think Starry, you nailed it there. I was watching that game going, okay, Jakey needs to find what he needs and like quick, otherwise this game is done. And then all of a sudden, oh yeah, no, he's got everything. This is fine, no problem, and just absolutely runs him over. And I think that goes to show, you know, a few things. And obviously, being able to get your pieces is important, but also knowing the matchup, knowing what you need to do, knowing how you need to control the tempo of the game to put yourself in that situation where you do draw the pieces, you still have life left, which is important. But also that you can kind of push to the front and win that game. So fantastically played by J King. We're going to see him compete in the finals of this OCC. But before we move on to the bronze match, we have another little surprise for you folks. We have another card reveal. Let's bring it up on the screen here. It is, drum roll, Stiff Upper Lip. Draw a card, draw another if you control a guard. This is a 2-credit British card. Starry, what do you think when you see this card?
Well, it is obviously a convoy that is discounted if you're playing a guard unit. So, what my immediate thoughts are is that it fits really nicely into a British Poland deck with the abundance of legions, especially with some of the new great legions cards that we've seen. Super excited about that. Being able to have a draw engine that is even more credit efficient is it's super advantageous for decks like that. And additionally, it does buff the archetype involving naval support and Coldstream guards in Oxford, where you're looking to play a bunch of large defense units, most of them being guard, like for example Churchill or Seaforth Highlanders. And so it's really cool to see support for an archetype that really doesn't often see support. Berto, what do you think?
I love to see control decks getting a little extra help, and you might look at this and say, well, it's convoy, but it's conditional, but 1 credit can mean a lot in a whole lot of games. And so I think if you're running a certain number of a critical mass of guards, which I'm not sure what that point is yet, maybe that's 15, maybe that's 20, maybe it's 10, a Stiff Upper Lip becomes really powerful and a really key draw engine in these control decks running a lot of guards. And I'm excited to see what it does in the coming meta.
I'm glad you both brought up the convoy comparison, because my first thought in seeing the card was, is convoy being rotated out? Because this just feels worse. But I think there are absolutely archetypes where it is more valuable, because to your point, Berto, just that 1 credit can leave you that extra credit to play what you just drew, and have it make an impact this turn, as opposed to like burning a turn, just going ahead and spending credits on draw. So very excited to see how that plays out. To your point as well, Starry, very excited to see how that is included with some of the new Legion cards coming out. And we will have 2 more card reveals for you after our bronze and after our grand finals. So we're going to be right back after this quick break to get into our bronze matchup here at the June OCC. Welcome back, everybody. We are here for the last two matches of our June OCC Clash. We've got our bronze match, we've got our grand finals, and we have two more card reveals from the upcoming expansion. It is going to be a wonderful time here. Let's bring up the bracket and take a look at who we're going to see in our bronze match here today. There you have Ozzy against Ziyang. We have J King versus Tang Tang, a true battle of the titans here for our grand finals in the June OCC Clash. You can see their paths to where they are now. Both these players in the bronze match did end up losing 2-0 in the semis, but I have no doubt it's still going to be a heck of a matchup. You've seen these players before, you've seen their decks before, but we're going to dive into them just quickly to give you an overview before we get into this best of 5. Now, there are no longer any bans. We're going to see everybody's full out lineup, so the matchups here and deciding what you want to play when are going to be extra important. Let's go ahead, let's take a look at what Ozzy's bringing to the table here. So why don't you, Bubbles, walk us through Ozzy's list?
So the first deck here, it's a USA deck, but you may be very happy to see that it's not a USA mid-range deck, but then you would be very unhappy to see that it's not a ramp or anything like that. It is a unitless deck. Now, this deck mainly wins through fatigue, through depletion of resources. You know, you just 1-for-1 answer your opponent's threats until they run out of threats to put down, and then you can slowly burn out their HQ of things like battery, and then your main win condition is often this fatigue damage. You can use things like Ferny War to accelerate your opponent's fatigue. You can use Call to the Colonies and Liberation to bolster your own HP to put yourself further away from it. It's just a very well-rounded deck against aggressive unit-based things. You do also have military research to go for nukes if you want. That's a nice option. It does suffer against some things like Brit Air because, you know, there's a lot of units that get very, very well statted, and they can often outdraw your threats. You sort of want to answer your threats before your opponent can reestablish themselves. But overall, in the right hands, this deck can be terrifying. In the wrong hands, this deck can struggle to win any matches. So it's really going to come down to how much has Azzy been able to practice this deck, how much experience have they got through this deck, because if you've got the experience to back this up, this deck is one of the most terrifying decks there is. This next deck is a Burst of Fire OTK deck. This tries to deploy large fighters as quickly as possible using ramp to accelerate their game plan into playing stuff like Bolster the Ranks to lower their operation cost for the Fury attack with Burst of Fire, as well as give them extra damage for that Burst of Fire, you know, combo. It's really quite scary for decks that don't have answers to it. Decks that struggle to guard up can be very much threatened by it. Slower decks, slower control decks especially. I think it might struggle against discard. There is a lot of discard floating about in this series, and that might be a difficulty because if your key cards like Burst of Fire and sort of Bolster the Ranks get discarded, it can be problematic. But on the other hand, a lot of these discard decks don't actually run that much guard these days. So if you're able to find your combo pieces and not have them discarded, you may better just go for a very early, very quick win. We do see some big late game cards like Empire of the Sun in here, and this may help against discard because you can do it on their late game big units, things like the Wellington or, you know, the Churchill, these sort of cards, which some players are starting to run in their discard deck, these heavier pieces. And talking of discard with some heavier pieces, Jesse's third deck is a discard deck with some heavier pieces. Now, this deck tries to use sort of early board tempo and board control with things like Monty, shelling, and supply shortage to shut down your enemy's aggressive start and then deplete their resources through cards like Case Yellow, Wolfpack, and MI5. And you're essentially just trying to 2-for-1 your opponent every time you play one of these. You discard one of their cards and you draw your own when you play MI5. Case Yellow, you do a removal piece, you buff your units, you discard theirs, you draw a card. Wolfpack, you discard their card and you stop them drawing. All these discard things are multi-purpose. You don't want anything which is solely discard. Annihilation, it removes a unit and it discards, you know. And Fog of War is one of the few things which isn't so much multi-purpose, but that still feels like unit removal. You're taking something off the board and you're putting it away on top of the deck. So all the discard pieces in this are multi-use, and when you combine that with this early control, with the supply shortage and Monty and Honeys, with this sort of mid to late game unit package like Sexton and Wrath and things, you have one of the most intimidating decks there is. We did see this struggle against Tang's very aggressive start on Brit Air, but generally this deck is considered a very strong answer to Brit Air because you're able to shut down their resources so effectively. Overall, it's a very slow sort of set of decks. We often see more aggressive, more tempo-based things, but we see Azzy taking a step back and saying, I'm going to play a little bit of a longer game and a little bit of a slower game.
Longer and slower. That is absolutely Darkness's favorite. So, Darkness, what's Z Young playing to try and counter Ozzy's lineup?
Well, Ziyang is playing longer and slower decks as well. As you can see, the first deck is German-Britain. It's a control discard deck. Spooz already talked a lot about this one. The British-German, the third deck, is very similar. And it's very similar to the deck his opponent Azzy is bringing. So both are settled a little bit on the control, on the discard side. In those mirror matchups, it really depends on who's going first, who's going second, who finds the card draw and the discard first, who's able to shut the other one down. These will be some very interesting, well, for me, interesting decks. Maybe a little bit slower than usual. But I'm looking at the second deck of Ziyang, and I'm a little bit concerned about this because this is his Achilles first. As you see, this is Japan, Britain, with a lot of AoE, like Tora, like supply shortage, desperate measures. Even Banzai is in there. So this deck has AoE damage and in total enough damage to kill the opponent's HQ, but it's targeted to play against ground-based aggressive decks. And Azzy is not bringing that. So I'm very concerned if Ziyang will be able to win with this Japan deck. This is the most critical thing for Ziyang. Or if he just get outmatched because he targeted very specific Jagro and aggressive decks, and Ziyang is bringing completely different stuff. As long as Azzy is able to play his decks like very good or perfect.
Thank you, Darkness. As we're waiting for the players here to dive in, quick reminder, there are no bans, right? So this is best of 5. Everything goes out. So no opportunity for Ziyang to maybe dodge that Jap Brit list that they are bringing. I do want to touch on something you mentioned, though, Bubbles. You were saying that there's a lot of discard hanging around, and you also have an OTK deck on Ozzy's side. Is it going to be that, hey, I have to be real careful with what I queue that into, because if my combo pieces get discarded, I can be in an awkward situation?
I think when it comes to more traditional sort of recent OTK decks like Siberian OTK or maybe a Commonwealth OTK, something like this, it is a real problem because you're so reliant on just a couple cards. But one of the things this fighter OTK deck does really well is their units don't disappear at the end of turn. One of the main OTK tools is this final push. And final push is really, really good because it's the most efficient way to get damage for credits. You get 1 credit for 3 damage, and often you're playing this with air reconnaissance where you get 3 damage for 0 credits, which is really, really powerful, but it does destroy the unit at the end of turn. When you're putting down fighters and you're casting bolster on them, even if you don't have a burst of fire, you can still just play the fighter, hit with the bolster, and then you have this large unit for your opponent to have to deal with. Annihilation, very good answer for these in the discard package. But apart from Annihilation, there's not that many answers that the Brit discard deck has to deal with them. They can Wrath it, they can Fog of War it, but it's got Blitz. You can just pick it up, play it again, hit again. So yes, you've got key cards like Burst of Fire and Bolster, which can be hit by discard. But just because of the nature of how this Japan sort of fighter Blitz OTK deck works, it is more resilient to losing its core pieces. And we saw that before. We saw, players just dropping it, buffing it, and attacking when they didn't even have lethal. I believe we saw a KI get buffed and it just Fury traded it into a guard and hit face without any lethal setup. It was just trying to apply as much pressure as possible.
I believe Spooz was the one who said it in the previous matchup that it's not a question of, hey, I have like one of each combo piece. I have multiple options. So if I do lose one, maybe it slows me down a bit, but it's not going to necessarily completely throw my plans off. Now, let's not forget, winner of this match takes home 100 USD, ends up with 15 points in the OCC point system. So a lot on the line here. Now, Darkness, you mentioned Xiang, that Jap Brit list that, is probably aimed more so for those aggressive ground-based decks. What kind of adjustment is Xiang going to have to bring to their playstyle to, still be able to win a game when maybe they go up against something that's completely unitless? Never mind, let's get right into it with both these players queuing up for our bronze match.
And we're seeing here Zhe Yang bringing the Germany main discard deck up against the bolster sort of OTK deck. Quite a slow and strong start here, actually, for Azzy. Although Zhe Yang as well having quite a strong start, having multiple hand lock cards as well as healing. These are your main tools for counteracting the game plan here from this sort of bolster OTK deck in the early game. You do have guards, but you want to play these later on when you're at bigger threat of being hit. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these two hands play out against each other. I think this KA83 in Azzy's hand is going to be a really important card to look out for, because this could generate so many cards and so much damage from Azzy's perspective that it could just put Zhe Yang in the dust.
I don't know if, of course, it's a very, very strong card, but maybe the early ramp in Hour of Need turn 4 is looking very, very powerful here. So Azzy actually choosing this over the key to get this ramp factor, since Zhe Yang is playing a relatively slow. Oh no, the Empire of the Sun got hit. This is the main draw engine for Azzy and powerful removal. Now Azzy is kind of forced to go a little bit more aggressive, a little bit for more card war, playing the key, but Admiral Hipper will send this back and even shut down one ramp, one credit card here. Azzy not playing around with the key again, just going straight for the war bonds to get more cards, to get more credits. But Zhe Yang has the second Wolf Pack already. Getting rid of the key, another card draw mechanic, and stopping one card draw. So only a war machine is left for Azzy here.
However, if Azzy drops this KI61, you can do a lot of damage to face. I don't think Zhe Yang has an answer immediately. Yes, you can play this C4, or you can do the double route out, which does clear the board, but it does generate some draw for your opponent and leaves you at 9 HP, which is a risky sort of HP pool to sit on. So it's going to be interesting. I do think there's the possibility that if Zhe Yang takes a little bit too long in answering this board, they're not going to be able to use their fortifications and guards and discard package all together to slow the game down long enough. The Sendai is going to be a great way of just dealing with this C4.
The Sendai is a way of dealing with the C4s, so yeah, no way he's skipping that. C4s is being played. Tony attacks, and I like how Azzy is holding the two ramp cards as targets for discard. Right now it's not important to have those, so sometimes it's just smart to keep hands you don't really need in hand to be able to catch some discard mechanics. The card draw.
Zhe Yang has a few different decisions. You can go for the sort of deploy a unit, heal yourself up, and put up this countermeasure to try and be defensive. But you do also have the option of developing this research soon, because this research is a really good way of getting your guard back. You can kill the Sendai once you reach U-Boat, and you can discard some of these key cards from Azzy's hand.
Another war machine from Azzy and Case Yellow. Not even targeting Sendai. That's interesting.
I imagine we'll see the 2K being floated here to put up. Yeah, fake out from the deep. And Azzy does now have the scouting party, has seen both routouts already, so knows that it's not at risk of being negated. Is going to try and bait out from the deep, but it was a fake here from Ziyang, and he's going to be able to put it up now with fairly large confidence that Azzy's expecting it to not be there. I'd like to see this sudden strike come out and just negate some of this draw here.
Yeah, that's necessary. Sudden Strike has to kill a 33rd Recon here. And 2 floating credits will be from the deep.
Another recon, they keep coming. However, a case yellow would be lethal here. So it's really coming down to it. From the deep, able to take out this recon. And Ziyang is going to be able to put Azzy down to 1. But with this burst of fire, okay, gonna go with the guard. Gonna roll the dice this way instead. It does mean Azzy is not going to be able to try any potential OTK potential with this burst of fire. Now, we do know Ziyang has the fortification, a very good sort of way of just surviving this late game period. Still, the mobilization available in the deck for Azzy. So if they're able to find that, they may be able to find some tools out. Banzai would also be an excellent answer for this board state. But finding a third war machine, and that is game there. Ziyang able to take game 1 in the discard versus bolster OTK.
Oh, control discard is so strong. I was talking about how the Japan list is the Achilles first for Jiang, but it seems like Azzy's Japan list is the same.
And now, next game, there are of course no bans here, so Ziyang has Brit and Japan to choose from still, as he has their full lineup to choose from. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a switch here from Azzy.
Yeah,
I feel like you don't really want to go into this Brit discard deck with this Japan OTK deck. It's just a little bit too risky. I feel like I would rather bring either the Brit discard deck myself and try and play in the mirror, just being confident that, hey, I have quite a heavy discard deck, or just to bring this USA unitless.
I would like the US unitless because I think it has the advantage over both.
Azzy is bringing the OTK deck again, saying, I want to get this OTK, and thinking about keeping the 2 war machines. I would like to see, throw one of them back, try and find some more sort of combo pieces. Finds both the Tony and the Burst of Fire, as well as the Sendai to bypass guards. But there are a lot of tools in Ziyang's hand, with the Ultra to protect from orders, the Fortification to heal yourself up. This is a really strong hand here for Ziyang as well.
Yeah, the hand by Jiang looks very strong. I would have liked both war machines to go like all in as a little bit of risky move, but often you run out of steam, you run out of cards, you do have credits, but nothing to follow up. So just keeping one is a good decision.
Now, interesting decision. You risk being blown out by a root out the enemy if you play the scouting party. However, I think it's worth doing it because you're forcing Ziyang to deal with the board, which is going to try and clear up Ziyang's resources so Azzy can do this OTK soon. We do see a lot of damage in Azzy's hand. Another recon. Azzy really finding their raccoons every single game.
Sendai Regiment will take care of the Spitfire. Really important here.
Now, I'm very curious to see if we're just going to see this Blackwatch slammed soon. It's a really strong piece against Azzy's deck because a lot of Azzy's deck is orders. But just going to be going face.
Not with those recons in the front line, the Blackwatch is not a great idea because in the end, Jiang is playing with discard and hand control. And those recons against the Blackwatch are drawing not 1 but 2 cards.
It's got to attack now, the Blackwatch.
Yeah, sorry.
Gonna be looking to guard up against that fighter. And I wouldn't be surprised yet. Go for the sudden strike. Just try to clear out some of these. Very good answer to the raccoons are things like sudden strikes, root out, anything which doesn't do damage, but instead just removes the unit's HP directly, or just removes the unit directly because it prevents draw being generated. Just really going for the bolster burst of fire.
Killing
Going
the
to bring the
C4s.
HP down to 9. Able to hit with the raccoon in the front line to bring it down to 8.
Raccoon
now-
in the front line. Or Weekend.
It's the raccoons.
The raccoons.
Yeah.
Since when?
Monty is looking like a very good option here. You can go for the Monty. You can fortify yourself up to regain some of this HP.
I do like the Monty a lot. Because there's no great option to deal with the 8-3 fighter right now. Flampanzer is a nice little option here. But Ultra could completely disable Azzy's entire turn here. Well, there's no Ultra, so the Warbonds is being played. Azzy will reach 12 credits and get an extra draw next turn.
And this is sort of one of the issues with taking this slightly slower route we're going with the MI5, is there's now an 8 attack fighter on the board. You also want to do some healing. Sure, you can go for the supply shortage. You can go for the case yellow and trade as well. There are options, but it's going to give Azzy opportunities to draw 2 cards and try and blitz out things to your face. You do also have the raccoons to gain more cards like that, and there's the mobilization.
I
Gonna
do
go for
like
the
this
trade.
option. Well, mobilization will end
Do it.
two.
Take the Ulster. Do it. Do it, Xiang. We want it. Yes!
The Ulster
for the
is so
Ulster.
strong against the OTK.
But he and
Yeah.
Bolster. But he instantly plays the mobilization.
He instantly played the mobilization.
Missing the
key.
lethal.
Missing lethal here. Azzy.
Just had to take a little bit longer and just, not rush into playing the Draw Engine. The KI Heian coming down with the bolster would have equaled 8 HP exactly and would have ended the game right there.
A little
And
bit
now
too greedy.
gives Ji Young opportunities to heal up. You have the Ulster, you have the fortifications. There's a lot of healing potential here for Ji Young. And that hasty movement from Azzy may have just cost him the entire match.
Possible. Flampanzer will get rid of the raccoon in the front line. I mean, there's Ultra and Fortification, so Ji Yang puts up some defenses. Azzy blitzing out the key Hien. Also, the ranks is caught by Ultra.
Hitting face down for 10. And Ji Young now going to be able to really just start to control this board. You've got this wolf pack to thin down Azzy's hand. You've got lots of healing.
And Blackwatch. Blackwatch to guard and making it a little bit more expensive.
Now we can see quite a neat, patrol come out here. Brings Ji Young down to 5. With this Ulster and Fortification in hand, things do seem on borrowed time here for Azzy.
Another wolf pack.
And Ji Young taking their time, not going to go the same route as Azzy and rush into things. The wolf pack does feel very, very strong here. If you're able to wolf pack the hand as well as find a comfortable way to not worry about the board state, then you're just in a really, really strong position. There is the potential for a draw card through this guard in the front line, so you have to be worried about that. But I think other than that, there's a lot of movement here for Ji Young.
I think Case Yellow attacking the key Hien and trade with Flampanzer into the front line and with the Kitty Hawk into the support line to get rid of the board threats while discarding the desperate measures.
You are at risk to any blitz fighters off the top, though.
Yeah, but there's no better play. I mean, there's 4 damage.
You could go for the Ulster. You could go for the Fortification.
Yeah, you could go for the Ulster.
Bombing raid off the top. Now, you are able to kill the Ulster here. As he
Right.
just has to decide, do you cast it on the Flampanzer or do you cast it on the HQ? I'd like to see it cast... Don't know, actually, because the Flampanzer, you leave the Ulster alive on 1 HP still, which isn't ideal. But if you target the face exactly, it would kill the Ulster, but it wouldn't kill the Flam. So there's a bit of a...
I mean,
Huh?
he targeted.
Oh, the animation was
H-
very weird there.
Yeah,
That was the HQ
targeted
target.
the
The animation
HQ.
went to the other side. I didn't see it hit the Blackwatch. I was very confused at what happened, but...
It was a little bit confusing.
Now, you have a
indeed.
really good play here you can do. You trade the Flampanzer into the guard, yet you follow it up with the Wolfpack, and you instantly discard the thing which as he gets off the top.
Yeah. You can even move Blackwatch forward. This will be a ton of damage. So this forces the trade into the Blackwatch by Sendai. And this will not only threaten Azzy, but yeah, forcing him to trade and giving you back, what was it? The C4?
I believe it is a C4 under there, but I'd almost be tempted to not go for the trade. Yeah, just pass back the turn and hope that you can find something to do a lot of damage off the top.
Well, by not trading, there's an annihilation to kill the Sendai and just dealing 6 damage. With the Blackwatch for Jiang.
Gonna go for the double fortification, put yourself up to 23 HP. Very, very safe.
Very safe, yes. Burst of Fire is not enough without a fighter.
And I imagine now there's a card kept in Azzy's hand, we'll now see the
Yeah.
Annihilation come down. Because you
Yeah.
can now get this discard aspect. We may also... Hold on, that's just lethal.
It's just
Going for the
lethal.
Lancaster. And Jiang taking an early 2-0 lead. It is not over yet. This is a best of 5, sorry. So Azzy able to try and crawl their way back in, but they are down 2-0. It's going to be a very difficult fight here for Azzy. And just trying repeatedly with this Japan deck, I feel like they really need to switch and just refresh it up, try and get a win on another deck. But something tells me Azzy's going to bring the deck yet again for a 3rd time.
Well, Jiang is technically leading 2-0. Yes, that is a fact. But this Japan deck by Jiang is focused against J aggro, is focused against ground-based units. So technically, Azzy now has 3 times a good matchup. So let's see how Azzy will play this out. Of course, it's still hard, as he has to win 3 times against a single deck. I really wonder how well Jiang constructed this Japan deck.
We see a very nice opener here for Azzy. Having ramp, having patrol to answer guards, as well as having draw and half of their combo, or more than half of their combo, sorry. So this is a really, really well-balanced hand. It's almost the perfect hand if you're Azzy.
Yeah, it's looking really good here. And of course you are right, Azzy is bringing it the 3rd time the Japan deck. Not
one more
at all.
game. It will work this game. It will work this game.
I mean,
And I'll be very interested to see if we see the patrol come out this turn and Azzy trying to bring down this HP a little bit, or if we're just going to see the ramp as well as the... Sorry, not the ramp, the draw this turn. But yeah, goes for the patrol. Allows Azzy to start bringing down this HQ just a little bit. You only need to do a couple points of damage. Once it's down to 18, the HQ becomes a lot easier for you to kill. Jiang just responding with putting a 0 down on the board. Get some board presence. And I'm curious if we will see a pass back here. No, gonna go for the Hien.
I would love a pass, but the Hien is dealing 5 damage and kind of forcing Jiang to attack into, to trade the 0. So the 0 deployment effect was 1 damage into the HQ of Azzy, but the Hien was 5 damage. Leaving Azzy with a better trade here. And again, just attacking into it with the Tony down to 9.
And this is a really difficult spot here because you want to play this fortification, you want to heal up, but there's not much you can do which is credit efficient alongside that, especially when you're at such high risk of being blown out by a bolster plus burst of fire. And with the amount of cards in Azzy's hand, or the amount of credits in Azzy's game, sorry, Azzy can fortification, draw cards, look for the bolster combo. I mean, they have the bolster ready, but they can look for the burst of fire.
Retreating the Tony does not feel right. I mean, as he can just play the Tony again, deal 5 more damage, and trade with the 1-2 Engineers Battalion into the front line. It's even with Bolster, it's not lethal yet. With Bolster, it's only 8 damage.
I wouldn't hate just going for a blitz out here, though. Bringing the HP down as much as you can. Just going for the bolster.
I don't
down to
like
1
this on-
HP.
I don't like this on Tony. On Ki Hien, this would give Azzy 1 more credit to operate, to use his unit and trade into the front line. Now there is an option for Ji Yang to just trade. Fortification will heal Ji Yang for 7, so this is 8. But Ki plus... No, there's no more bolster, so it's just the Ki. Well, just 5 damage and the scouting party. So this is still a ton of damage. And Ji Yang does not have enough credits to play and operate the 7 credit fighter.
There's not really an out here. For Xi Yang, I believe this is just game. You can't go for the Lend-Lease because there's nothing you can find which is going to keep you alive. You can't do some sort of just going for the surrender. As he finally able to take the win with this Japan deck. And going to be able to move on to other things now. Putting it up to 2-1. Still on Xi Yang's lead, but less of a, impossible feat for Azzy now. If they're able to win one more game, they'll put it on an equal footing. And I do think that this is not a terrible matchup for the unitless deck. There are some blitz fighters and things, but you have so much healing that I don't think you worry about it too much. Things like Tora, and all these answers to aggressive decks aren't really relevant when you're playing unitless.
And when you're playing unitless, there are things like counterattack and air defense, just instantly killing things like Tony. So I'm looking forward to see the unitless deck, but first, as he chooses to play the discard control deck, in the opening hand just
very strong opener here for Azzy. Having the Pioneers into a strong turn 2 can go with the Honey or the MI5. This Annihilation is going to be really, really powerful this matchup, as it's just a great answer at dealing with these
another
zeros.
MI5. This looks already very strong. Ji Yang has nothing to play. Turn 2. And as he is going for the MI5, already reducing the options of Ji Yang here. I like it. Honey would be a little bit more efficient to gain HP.
I don't see this getting better for Xi Yang here. I don't see how this gets any better. I feel like the longer the game's going on at this rate, as he's finding more and more resources, and Xi Yang's resources are just stagnant, you don't want to play these cards out of your hand to be efficient, because then you get so heavily hit by discard that I don't see how Xi Yang is finding a way to sort of gain back the tempo they've lost here. The moment you play a unit, Fog of War, put it back on the deck. We may see a KI-83 come out and Xi Yang try to do some draw generation from that. However, there's so many good answers from Azzy here.
There's even a cast reduced annihilation. Well, technically not enough.
But you can just go for the Fog of War this turn. Get rid of it. You don't see any draw from it. Yes, they do find 2 copies of it, but one of the pieces of logic is while they have multiple copies of it, the later the game goes, the easier it is going to be to deal with it. But instead saying, you know what, keep it, gain some card draw, I'm going to gain some health of this. finding 2 Torotoras, really not what you're looking for in this matchup.
Looks like as he just used this card to gain HP, gain some cards themselves, and of course now having the annihilation ready to just get rid of it and get rid of 1 fortification here. I'm sure it doesn't.
61st Infantry is actually quite a nice card to have here because it does generate you some draw as well as having a body that Azzy has to answer. However, it feels like at this point, you know, you've just got these tiny little things that you're throwing at Azzy, and Azzy's got this huge hand with so many answers to your problems. Just gonna go for the Mosquito. I see this problem just getting worse and worse here for Shi Young still. Soul of Old Japan. Gonna give you some very interesting options. Gonna take the Elephant Boys. This does give you 2 card draws from the guard. However, this is sort of those were possibly some of the worst 3 cards we could have seen. I think the only thing which could have been worse was seeing a Pete in there as well.
And maybe the Signal Regiment because of the total amount of health by Azzy. But yeah, it wasn't great or near average for Jiang, those options.
And I'd like to see the Fog of War on this Elephant Boys if the moment you're going to trade into these guards. You put the Elephant Boys back on top of the deck, you give 2 of them to Shi Young. They're really not that useful for Shi Young. Shi Young does not want to be drawing more of these, and you're able to kill the guard when the elephants aren't on the board. So the moment as he decides it's time to kill this 4/4 guard, I'd like to see the Elephant Boys removed first.
Yeah, I agree. The Type 96 AA gun has another destruction effect. So
yeah, there's a lot of destruction effects going about. You would almost think this is like a destruction based deck or something, but no, this is a sort of Japan control. I don't know how I describe it. Just a Japan Brit control sort of AoE deck, which has turned out to be a destruction deck. We're getting a little snapshot into the new meta here.
Well, next turn, Jiang is able to play 2 Toras to get rid of everything.
I really want to see this.
Is this a case yellow against with the elephant? This is a
generating 2 cards here.
Double destruction effect for Jiang. This is value.
The other one.
And another
2 cards.
Another 2
the
cards.
Elephant Boy draw cards destruction effect. Actually putting Shi Young back into almost a full hand size, has so many more options now. You have the Audacity, you have the Bombing Raid. This is oh my lord, this is tragic here for Azzy, but completely preventable. And now Shi Young arguably back into the game.
Jiang was able to get 2 card draws out of those Elephant Boys. What makes this option really, really strong. I'm very impressed. Well, Lancaster will be another problem.
However, the 0 is a very good answer to it, as well as the Wrath Lightning. These are both good solutions to it. Yes, they can get put back with things like Wrath, Sexton, and Fog of War, but Ji Young, not aware of these, is going to have to do something. Considering just going for the Audacity, if you can hit the Audacity plus the 0 or the Tora, you can actually remove this Lancaster this turn, which would be a very huge swing around.
Audacity, 50-50 chance hitting the Pioneers.
Oh, not what you want. Decides to go for the Wrath Lightning, since, you know, this 0 destruction effect wouldn't do it anymore. Gonna overdraw the root out. Not too of an important overdraw. It does deal with the Aichi very well, but you have generally a lot of answers to this. You've got a lot of fighters, you've got a lot of AoE in this deck. I don't think you're too fussed about losing that.
It's still a nice overdraw. Root out would have been a decent play. Now it's the Kitty Hawk to block, Sexton to lock down.
The
and
second
Ultra.
Aichi if you're able to find a way to deal with this fighter fairly soon, you can actually buff this Aichi up with the second Aichi, and that's a really good way of answering Sexton. However, there are still problems here. If you go for this Kawanishi Tora play, you are going to be blown out by this Ultra.
Ultra comes finding
Into a
shelling. Ooh, this looks not good for Jiang.
Definitely need to trade away here. Get rid of this bomber. Make sure your support line isn't full. If you can avoid it, you want to not fill up your support line against Brit decks until you've seen this Monty and this Shalling both come out. Annihilation, a very good option here, but I imagine this Kawanishi is going to be something that Azzy desperately wants to get rid of. Gonna go for the bounce into the case yellow, tried to high roll it, and hits it, gets rid of the Kawanishi, puts Jiang down to 6, and says, the time is now, you got to do something or I'm going to kill you as soon as possible. Now, we do have Banzai, however, Banzai is a very, very slow sort of tool to dealing with the Sexton, and it gets rid of your guard. I feel like that discard just then may have been it. That, you know, Tora plus Kawanishi is a very good way of getting out of this. You wanted to try and find a Tora off the top with that. I don't see what Ji Young can do to pull their way out of this, and it looks like Azzy is going to be taking this for 2-2.
Also, ends
hitting your
turn.
own guard. And now I believe there is lethal. You go for the Brit research, you put it into synthetic rubber, you buff the Wrath Lightning, and you hit face for lethal.
11 credits will this be? So this is lethal, but
deciding to not win the game. I had to say it. I know it wasn't intentional, but I can help myself.
Well, to be fair, there's nothing Jiang is able to do here. Well, technically able to get rid of this Wrath Lightning, and Lancaster is unable to finish the job here. So right now there's not a lethal option. Jiang technically not dead, but also not having a lot of options.
And technically not dead is the best kind of not dead. However, for how long is the question. This Lancaster in hand can better close out the game pretty much instantly unless Yang can find another fighter off the top.
Another 0 protecting the HQ from Lancaster. And the Syrian and last rights. Jiang is really going for it.
I think they're also trying to play around discard. These cards are useless if they get discarded. I'm just going to chuck them down.
But Wolfpack will prevent a draw. So
I'd have really liked to see Wolfpack plus Fog of War to put this 0 back on top of the deck and make sure that it doesn't get drawn again.
yeah, this would...
Gonna go for it now by the looks?
This would prepare next turn lethal by guarantee.
Why would you put that
he's
on
not
top?
choosing the 0.
I'm perplexed. I don't know what to say. Usually I can explain why, but Azzy maybe just wanting Ji Young to surrender?
Jiang
I don't know.
got confused and hurt itself. Maybe that was a strategy to play some mental games.
You know what I've thought to myself though? If I ever get back into OCCs, I'm purposely going to do mistakes just to annoy the casters. And I'm wondering if there's there may be someone watching that Azzy just wants to frustrate. Because especially if J-King's casting, I'm like, I want to do these little errors that most people won't be frustrated by, but will tilt J-King so hard. Just because, a bit of fun between friends. Finally, we get to see the unit.
When I think about fun between friends with J-King, I think about the Resistance mirror matches lasting for over 60 minutes. This is really annoying for the casters. I think, didn't you cast one of those?
No,
No.
me and Spooz managed to avoid it. It was
Ah.
Admirable and Ollie were stuck with those. Me and Spooz sat on a sofa watching the game, eating sort of sweet foods, thinking to ourselves, thank God that's not us. Thank God we're not cast in that. And Ollie and Admirable doing their best to not lose their energy that they're known for. You know, these are quite energetic people, but it was still draining them.
Yeah.
And look at these hand size here. Azzy completely full and Xiyang already trying to drop their hand. It's interesting to actually drop cards from your hand because you do put yourself closer to fatigue when this phony war can come out. However, it's very good against defend in depth. So it's one of these things where you have to make a decision. Do I play around defend in depth or do I play around the fatigue that's going to be coming in X number of turns?
Dependent depth overdrawn. This hurts RC a lot. It's a very powerful removal card. And as he will receive.
It's another KI-83 and a Kawanishi. I think Okay, going for the Kawanishi. I like this. This is playing around the long game. This is saying I'm going to be able to do a lot of damage later.
The second defendant depths got overdrawn. As he has to play the patrol gunship mission to get rid of some cards to be able to draw something. Jiang, I don't know if I agree with the Kawanishi choice here. Of course, it's a ton of damage in the end if you're going to fatigue.
I'd like to note there are 0 units in Azzy's deck. The only way of generating units is from Seaboard Invasion. So things like Raiden Brigade, things like Audacity, things like the supply shortage, there's not much point holding on to them other than preventing your hand size being increased, putting you closer to fatigue with this phony war.
Yeah, very good point.
It is worth noting, though, Xiyang is a lot further from fatigue than their deck may appear because you do have this last rites. Putting all of these kamikazes into your deck, able to prevent fatigue, and sometimes you are able to calculate exactly lethal with the Kawanishis. So it's a very important thing to focus on. And if Azzy can find a way to make this last rites get overdrawn, this could be absolutely game-changing.
I'm looking at both phony wars here, and if Jiang is choosing to play one card here, I think it's worse going for the phony war to look at the fatigue game here. But the US military research, of course, is very, very important, and as he has a lot of credits to spend.
There's 2 trains of thought when putting units down against unitless. You don't want to play around high altitude bombing, which was I was just about to bring up, because if you put units down, it creates a perfect high altitude bombing. But if you put 1 unit down, it makes it so much easier for Azzy just to answer it. This deck doesn't run much AoE, and it more focuses on target removal. So one of the ways you can deal with unitless really well is swarming the board, and they can sometimes struggle to deal with this, especially if your swarmers in the front line, because all the AoE this deck runs is typically stars and stripes and strap bombing, which just hits the back line.
But there's not a lot in Jiang's deck to swarm the front line. Jiang is not playing a lot of units. No, but you can certainly
wait and play multiple fighters in one turn. I'm not saying it's the correct way to do it, it's just the 2 lines that you have to think about.
Yeah.
Like here, you could do Kawanishi plus Serene. It's a very interesting way to play this turn. You've seen the high altitude, you've seen the DFA, it's not a terrible option.
And you've seen all of the defend in depths. So...
Can better find a battery off the top just to answer this, Serene. I'm going to continue to expand this research. It's difficult because the nukes aren't actually that impactful. However, the penicillin really isn't what you want because it draws you closer to fatigue. Going to play the Lend-Lease, find a lot of cards. I'd like to see, something dumped from hand this turn. I may even like to see a Tora come out just to make this hand as small as possible.
I would like a Tora, but this would play into Liberation by giving an extra resistance. And look at Azzy. This is so much. 17 HP. The Shin will deal a lot of damage, but it's still above 20 here.
And yet, taking the 1 damage, absolutely the correct way to do these resistance cards, because 1 damage now is a lot better than being 1 closer to fatigue.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to see a lot of resources expended here from Azzy to deal with this Shiden, which does sort of set Ziyang up to maybe try and do something with Kawanishi. You have another one in the deck just in case this one gets destroyed. And now look at this. Kamikaze doing 3 damage, Tora doing another 3 damage. One interesting thing to note is resistance cards will now do 3 damage to your own HQ as well.
Ah, yeah, that's true. Well, Jiang is in no need to play this resistant card.
Able to find the DFA for Azzy, but still,
Very important.
I feel like there's a lot
Very
of
important.
potential pressure here for Ziyang, right? You could put down this 0, put down this Wrath, and by the time nukes come out, it's going to be too late. Gonna go for the Kamikaze now. Gonna go for the Phony War.
Ah, there's a second gunship. No, what's
Yeah, it's a second gunship.
gunship mission? So just not enough credits, but it's heal and damage.
However, Ziyang, if Ziyang is able to push lethal with the resources they have, I can very much see Azzy not able to focus on dealing with that. I don't see him having the cards to deal with that. However, if Azzy is able to answer Ziyang's current hand, I could see this going Azzy's way through fatigue. My only concern is you still have a Kawanishi and a Last Rites in the deck. And if Azzy can't find an answer to this Kawanishi by overdraw, maybe with a Liberation, then I think Ziyang is going to be able to finish off the game just through burn.
The burn will hit hard.
You are able to go for this gunship plus develop nukes this turn.
I think Azzy has to go for the nukes. There's I mean, the mobilization can find some removal, but I don't think there's a lot of reliable removal left. So Manhattan projects will definitely deal with this rough lightning and future threats. So it's very important to get to this point of research.
Now, you know the nukes are going to be coming down. So I'd like to see pressuring as much as possible with the Wrath. And then mostly, I'd almost like to see a Type 96 AA come out just for the draw. You drop the AA gun, you draw a card when it gets destroyed.
Yeah,
Because I feel like you're very close to finding lethal as is.
Oh, liberation
Liberation
to block the entire hand and then
this
Manhattan
overdraw.
project.
This overdraw is going to be really, really important to the outcome of this game. The Siren, not what you need to be overdrawn. The Kawanishi as well.
That is
However,
crucial.
Last Rites is still in the deck, so Last Rites avoiding fatigue may be enough, but Ziyang has drawn a lot of cards here. I'm not sure how big each of these decks are, but I know Ziyang's deck, just by looking at it, is smaller than Azzy's.
Maybe we can the information from the production side. How many cards are left? Phony War, drawing 2 cards for Azzy and 3 for Jiang. Battery will draw more here.
That's another overdraw, right? Home defense overdrawn. That's a nice overdraw. 4 cards left in Jiang's deck, 8 cards left in Azzy's. And we're yet to see an overdraw here of this Last Rites.
Look at those Archies. If they are getting destroyed, they will spawn new bombers. And those bombers will still enable the Empire Strike. So there's more nuke coming.
You might go for the torpedo attack. But only 8 cards in Jiang's hand. It's not going to be an overdraw.
I feel like you could float this turn.
You could do, but I feel like if you float this turn, Jiang gets rid of resistance cards and hits your face for 4. I don't see Jiang doing too much to make themselves more vulnerable than they already are. Oh, wait a minute. Look what's in Jiang's hand next to the 0.
The kamikaze.
Yeah, the last rights.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
in his hand. It's the alternative skin. My apologies to anyone in chat screaming, what do you mean last rights overdraw? It's in his hand. That is the alternative skin for last rights, and I had not noticed that it was sitting in Jiang's hand. How long has that been there, Darkness?
I'm afraid I did not catch it either.
Hopefully it's not been there very long.
No, I think it was 2 turns ago when he drew it. But I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I believe it was the last phony war that we saw it drawn. But unfortunately, not noticing it because well, what can I say? I'm a good person. I don't play last rights very often.
Nukes
Too busy
are
playing
coming in.
Wolfpack.
Killing the 0, killing both bombers. Gunship mission has to take out one of them, and I guess the cross, no, the shore bombardment takes out the other one. This means the Empire Strikes will deal less damage now, and Jiang running a little bit out of damage.
However, I think you're going to win just through fatigue, right? I think Azzy is trying to hold back on this Seaborn in the hopes that Seaborn will win in the game. But with the hand here, you've got this Banzai, you've got the Torres, you've got the Desperate Measures. I don't think there's any way in which this Seaborn Invasion gives you a unit which is good enough.
Seaborn Invasion is able to high roll a lot.
Sure, but what are you high rolling? A California, it still dies to AoE. You know, a 5th Rangers, it can still die to AoE. However, a 4-3 which repeats itself may just do it because this unit is able to redeploy itself. We are going to need to see Azzy heal.
When it's dying on the opponent's turn, but with Desperate Measures and Supply Shortage, the damage is applied on Azzy's turn. So Jiang is able to take that out without copying it and then waiting for the fatigue.
That is 100% true. If you use the Supply Shortage, you are able to kill this without creating any more duplicates of it. And Jiang seeing the play, and Dazzy now not having any more way of getting units in the deck, this really looks like it's going to be Jiang's game just through fatigue.
That's basically it. There are no more units, and currently we are... What is Jiang doing? Did he calculate it? How much damage is that? I think it's 9 damage, 10. This should be lethal. If I counted correctly, this should be lethal for Jiang.
Yeah. Yeah, that's lethal, right?
It's 11 damage and turret
it's exactly lethal.
Wow.
And there you go.
That was close.
Jiang able to take the 3-2 eventually, taking an early 2-0 lead, but was able to take this 3rd win eventually. And I believe that puts them as the first player to win some OCC points.
That is 15 OCC points right there. Not too bad. Heck of a matchup going to all 5. We saw the early lead, the comeback story. Darkness, you called out that the Japan lists might be kind of the Achilles heel and might be a little bit more challenging to get through, but turns out not having any units in your deck is sometimes a bit detrimental. So heck of a series. We still have the finals for you, but before we get there, why don't we take a peek at our next card reveal? Darkness, I hung on to at least one German for this card reveal. I believe it is called the Stuka, but feel free to tell me how wrong I am when this comes up on screen.
Yeah, this is the Stuka 87R. Actually, there is already a similar version of the Stuka in this game. It's the Stuka 87B, what is technically the same airplane, but a little bit of history facts here. The Stuka 87R has a higher range. This is what the R stands for. It has more fuel tanks below the wings and can carry less bombs, but has a higher range of operation. And compared to the other Stuka, it is definitely able to act better on the battlefield, because this one has Blitz, 4 credits, Bomber, 2 operation cost, 3 2 stats. Those are similar, but this one has Blitz and a veteran effect. So this one becomes a veteran after an enemy ground unit is destroyed, and with this veteran form, the enemy discards a card when you attack and destroy a ground unit. So there is another elite card for Germany, able to get this discard or able to support the discard archetype. And yeah, I think the artwork looks very cool. This Duke and the colors really fits in the German scene. What do you think, Bubbles?
I am very excited to run this card. I think this card's really, really good. The obvious thing people say is, oh, it says discard, I'll put it in discard. But I think this card is a little bit like Jag Bomber and a little bit like the 1-2 Heinkel, where I think it's going to be playable in most things. I think it's just that consistent and that powerful. There's a lot of things to look at with this. It has Blitz, which is a really, really powerful ability in cards. One of the sort of ways that a lot of top players look at cards is how long does it take me to get reward from the things I'm playing. This is why deployment effects and Blitz are really, really powerful. And when things don't have deployment effects or Blitz, they need to offer something else really, really useful. We see high stat guards, things like the Sky Train, which just offers so much value. But generally, deployment abilities and Blitz are the name of the game. And this fits that perfectly. You can Blitz us out, kill a unit, and instantly flip it to be veteran. Now, for anyone asking, veteran units are the same unit as before. So while the veteran side has Blitz, you are not able to Blitz out attack, flip it, and then Blitz attack again. It is the same unit. What this Blitz on the veteran side is for is you can play the Stuka, and then you can trade one of your ground units or use an order to kill an enemy ground unit, flip the Stuka using something else, and now that it is flipped, you can now do the first attack with it this turn to trigger this discard effect immediately. So the later the game goes, the more creative you're able to use this card to generate instant discard. It is. I just think this discard a card whenever the opponent loses a unit to you attacking them is a really potent effect. And if you're a unit-based deck, if you're Jagro and you've not dropped Feigned yet, and you've got multiple units on the board, obviously Feigned is getting rotated, maybe we're playing classic game mode, and you just start trading away with all their ground units, you're just going to shred their hand away. USA Frontline, units all over the place. If you're able to trade away their units, you're just going to shred their hand away. One deck I want to play this in is going to be a Germany-Soviet pincer deck, because this deck is really good at trading. You've got things like the ME, which make you draw. You've got things like the Nashi, which gives you credits when you trade. You've got Marder, once again, draw when you trade. This deck is so good at trading that I think this is going to slot in perfectly in there. I think this card is amazing. And I know I speak for the community when I say, finally, we see a German elite. We get a little sneak peek of what Germany are getting. There are another 2 German elites on the way, which I'm excited to find out what they are. But this is it. I've seen people asking for a long time. Let's see some German elites. Here you go. It's a veteran Stuka.
I think I want to play it in German-Italy Control. Because German-Italy Control has so much cards like the research, the V1 flying bombs, the sudden strike, line for a day, you can instantly kill. It shouldn't be a problem to kill a ground unit, and with this Juker, you can also, get it veteran instantly, and you should be able to stay long enough into the game to be able to operate it, because it's not that cheap. For aggressive decks, it's a little bit too slow, I think. The 2 operation cost and 4 deployment cost. But looking at control decks, yeah, you can basically fit this everywhere if you want to.
I think, Bubbles, to your point, that's the versatility that Blitz brings, is that you can kind of squeeze it into different options. Now, you mentioned more German elites coming. We do have another elite card for you today, not a German elite, but you also may want to tune into the podcast later this week, the Frontline podcast. There may be a few additional spoilers coming up there. Maybe. We'll have to see. So let's hold on to that. We do have a grand finals for you today. So let's bring up the bracket and see where we got to and how we got to where we are right now. You're going to see J King taking on
Just
Tang.
to mention, we do have another special.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Good catch there, Darkness. I don't know why I got so hyped. I thought we would save the best for last, but
We do see another special, Christo.
okay. Oh,
We already
sorry.
had one special, so it's 2 specials today.
Look
even
at us
after
go.
the elite.
Look at
Yeah.
us go. So excited. So exciting. J King Tang. I'm also excited for that. It's going to be a heck of a matchup. $250 to the winner, $150 to the second place. 25 points on the line as well for the OCC point system. 18 points for second place. So lots going on here. Let's get to it in this grand finals here for the June OCC clash. We've seen the deck lists. We're gonna take another little peek at them, get you a little refresher. We seem to be having some slight technical difficulties with Berto's camera. We're gonna dive just straight into the decks. Let's start with J King. Let us see what J King is bringing. Bubbles, can you walk us through what this lineup looks like?
And this is the sort of hurrah for this area of cards lineup. We've got Feign Retreat Aggro or Jagro, which is getting rotated out. We've got Ura OTK decks, which is getting rotated out. And we have Man Nostrum Control decks, which is getting rotated out. We're still going to see similar decks exist afterwards, but they are going to evolve. This Jagro deck is going to have to change in multiple ways. I'm personally looking towards a Japan Soviet sort of destruction aggro deck, but I'm very, very interested to see what everyone else produces. Maybe with some pincer Jagro, what runs are people going to use? There's a lot of interesting things which could happen from the point we're currently on. But yeah, this deck, very traditional, very popular. I think ever since its inception, this deck has been seeing competitive play. It did go down to tier 2 for a little bit, but it quickly came back to tier 1, and it is just so versatile. It's able to beat Bridair, it's able to beat Frontline, it's able to beat Server Control, it's able to beat Discard. It can be anything. It's not favored versus everything, but it certainly has a good shot against everything. Now, this next deck is a Siberian Transfer OTK deck. Now, you delay the game for as long as possible. You fill up your hand over and over again with cards like Convoy. You know, you've got this By the Sword. So you just slow down the game with your cards, draw more cards, slow down the game, draw more cards, until eventually, just by pure matter of the game going on for a while, you'll find your final pushes, your Kyusha, your Siberian Transfer, and your Ura, and you'll better just lethal from the backline. Oh, but what if my opponent heals? Well, that doesn't matter either. We have Great Patriotic War, which resets both HQ counts to 12. We did see J King, get a win earlier with this GPW combo. Very, very fun deck. I don't know what else to say to this deck other than it is a blast to play, and I personally think it is a blast to watch as well. Now, this third deck is Germany, Italy Control. This is a classic deck. This is what people normally mean when they say control. I remember for a long period, people would say, I'm bringing control. You would ask which control because you knew they meant Germany, Italy Control. You tried to utilize this Man Nostrum to really elevate these mid to late game cards. You've got things like Panther G, JU88, Comet, Decima, and Leopold, not all of which work with their Man Nostrum, sure, but they're just a really strong late game package. And you combine them with things like Lurking Danger, the Heinkel, all of these things to try and shut down your opponent's early game plans. this deck is, I think, quite skill intensive. I think it can be quite difficult because you can win any matchup with this. There's not really a bad matchup. Maybe USA Frontline's a bad matchup, but if you play your cards right, you should be able to be at least comfortable against most decks.
Beautiful. And J King, no stranger to control, usually pretty darn comfortable with it. Berto, are you with us?
Am.
Beauty. Berto, why don't you take us through what Tang Tang has got locked and loaded in this grand finals?
Well, I have a safe what Bob was talking. Was definitely hoping to
Gotta say, it sounds a little bit like Berto's been hit by one of these shells. We did hear some artillery from the Soviet positions earlier. Now, I believe there's been a German counteroffensive and there's been some heavy artillery sent, but I think the Americans and Brits are on the way on the other front. So I imagine this artillery shelling Berto's position should sort itself out fairly soon.
Well, yeah. Well, that is sorting itself out. Maybe we can have a Brit come to the rescue and walk us through what's left of Tang Tang's
We've got, okay, it's quite a classic matchup here. We've got USA Germany frontline classic deck. We've got Brit Japan Air, absolute classic deck, and Soviet USA also a classic deck. These are what has been meta for a long time. The only thing missing here is the Jaguar deck, but luckily for us, Jaking brought that, so we get to see all 4 petals of what has been popular in the most recent meta. And yeah, these are just absolute staples of cards. If you play ladder, you see these. If you play tournaments, you've seen these. Probably if you haven't ever played cards, you just, your cousin plays cards. You probably know what these decks are just because they are that prolific. We see really important key early game cards like Red Devils and this 99th and this USA deck. We see possibly the most well-rounded package you can get in this Brit Air deck with strong draw cards, strong tempo, strong AoE, strong buffs, and strong late game. And this Soviet USA ramp deck is one of the few ramp decks which still survives. Ramp used to be a very, very popular deck. You used to be able to do all sorts of interesting ramp things. But as the game sped up, as tempo became more and more meta, most ramp decks went the way of the Dodo Bird. However, this Soviet USA able to delay the game as much as possible, using cards like Spiring as a top-end late-game card along with B-17s and Partisans, one of the few ramp decks which actually survived that sort of shift in the cards meta.
I mean, I think you said it best when, essentially this is probably the perfect send-off for our current meta. With Tang Tang versus J King, all of the top decks represented. Sure, we throw in a little bit of a wacky OTK deck, but it feels like the perfect scenario to kind of wrap this up before we head into the expansion, into the reserve pool, and a drastic change in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a little bit of a controversial decision from 1939 to rotate J King and Tang Tang specifically. I did think they'd only be hitting cards, but to be honest, I'm happy to see these players leaving with this rotation as well. I think it's just going to offer more space for other players to come into the scene.
You heard it here first. J King and Tang Tang being rotated out. The beauty of the cards rotation style is that they might come back later. We don't know. Might be a couple months, might be a couple years. Who's to say? But as we look at their deck lineups, as Berto tries to rebuild the Canadian internet infrastructure, anything catching your eye in the way how this matchup is going to play out? Anybody have an advantage here with these two lineups?
I think, and this is the most non-answer you could ever get, I think both players have an advantage. Tang Tang has the meta decks. He knows what he's doing with the meta decks. They're really, really comfortable with these meta decks. However, J King has the non-meta decks. You've not played against these before. You maybe not as experienced. So I think it really depends to if Tang Tang is able to face stuff they're not used to, or if J King's sort of newer, weirder decks is going to be something Tang Tang struggles with.
Berto, welcome back. You made it.
Thank you. Glad to be back. Missed it for the world.
Got out of the survived the Eastern Front. Okay, got out of the
yeah,
World War II experience.
Even if I have to splice my Ethernet cord back together, I'm gonna make it here. We have two very adaptable players. I don't think Tang Tang is going to struggle too much with adapting to these unorthodox lists. And we see Tang finding quite a good matchup here. Air is very strong into the Siberian Transfer OTK deck, largely because you don't need to move any units into the front line, really, which slows down the Siberian Transfer OTK deck a lot. And these bombers are able to get through the guards.
The amount of draw in Jaking's hand. Now, what do you think you get rid of if less ahead? Do you think you just scrap one of these convoys? Do you get rid of maybe this bloody sickle because it's not so useful against the Brit Air list? There's a lot of draw here, and you could draw into a very early OTK, but there's a lot of tempo here from Tang as well, right? Who do you think is favored just in this early start?
I would definitely put Tang as being favored because Jaking has the draw to find what he needs, but Tang has what he needs, which
it is a one-up on.
Yeah,
Finding
for
the
sure.
second Cass as well. Tang, considering just putting down the Cass right now, I suppose. Is that a Scorched Earth play around? I didn't think Jaking was running Scorched Earth.
No, Jaking runs 3 copies of Scorched Earth. So this is absolutely to play around Scorched Earth, being a little less efficient, but at the same time playing around Scorched Earth. So a little bit of a cost there, but it works out okay. And it's mainly the bombers that you need the buffs on, because Jaking does run things like Bryansk Irregulars.
Now, Jaking, having a few decisions, just going to go for the V1 Flying Bomb and take out one of these Swordfishes. Having these 2 fortifications in hand is quite nice, however, a lot of early pressure here from Tang on this Brit Air list. Jaking just waiting for Tang to deploy a unit, but Tang not doing so.
Oh, thinking about it.
Oh, there you
And he
go.
does.
The aerial reconnaissance. That is a, 1, 2, 7 credit reduction on Jaking's hand. And now has options for Jaking. Can go for the fortification. Always draw first, despite what you've seen today.
It's nice to have a healthy mix. A little bit of draw first, a little bit of draw last. Jaking deciding that's enough pressure that he needs to play this Scorched Earth, which should be a good enough reason for Tang to develop a little bit more on this board.
Now, this National Fire Service is a very nice find. However, you kind of want there to be more on the board when you play it right. So Jaking is going to need to start dumping hand. So you need a smaller hand size so that you can draw the things you need.
Yeah, there is a lot that you can play. You can play this delaying tactics just because it costs 1k to get out of your hand. And it doesn't do a lot in this matchup.
And this is the delaying tactics and the mud are the reasons this or one of the reasons that this matchup is sort of Brit Air favored. Obviously, these bombers bypassing Brinks regulars and the early game pressure is really nice as well. However, you do make quite a few cards in Jaking's deck dead cards. Just getting the second Scorched Earth out. Now Tang has a few options.
I like going for the draw. You're still able to get pre-damaged through, and you look for more close air supports, more naval supply runs. Instead, opting to develop. Yeah, developing units is also strong here.
Now, you've seen Siberian Transfer. You've seen 2 final pushes. You might be comfortable going for this overdraw.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to find tools. You need to find them now. You need to be able to win the game shortly. Because there are not a lot of answers in Jaking's deck, simply things that delay the game mostly.
I like your general description of cards there. You know, you need to win the game, you need to do things.
I'm not wrong.
You are technically correct.
Well, I simply mean that J King, he doesn't have a lot of removal in his deck, and instead he needs to kill Tang Tang quickly.
Now, Tang Tang finding another Cass. Able to hit face for 4, and it may be getting to the point. Kayusha, quite a bad overdraw actually, as this would give you a much easier lethal with the Ura. However, with Scorched Earth available for J King, he may try and do some Scorched Earth maneuvers and just completely brick Tang Tang's backline. Yes, it only affects the Albacore, but this means there's no unit which is now, quote unquote, cheap or free for Tang Tang to attack with.
That's true, and it does prevent 2 damage from J King's perspective.
There's also reduce this armor train's operation cost by 1, which is
which is pretty sweet.
pretty sweet, you know. You take these things, you take these things. Lots of little W's, you know, they make up the grand scheme of this.
Exactly. That's the sort of ordering that wins games. That's how J King gets these tiny edges. That's why he has a 2% higher win rate, or however much it was.
Oh, the win rates. Nothing makes you feel like you're bad at cards than seeing J King and Tang Tang's win rate. Now, Tang Tang, having a few options, is able to just pressure face. The National Fire Service coming out, responding with the Shalling, which is going to delay J King's potential OTK. Now, reason to put this Brianx Irregulars in the front line is to enable this OTK. However, this could be potentially quite a game swinger if you're able to find your... I mean, that will do. First rifles of Brianx Irregulars, push it to the front line, and you sort of start to threaten lethal, right?
Yeah, it's just a lot of credits to move to the front line. So you're spending 6 just to play Siberian Transfer to move up and to attack, and then it becomes 10 with Ura and double final push.
Do you need to move up the T-34? If you do Ura, oh no, you need the double Ura, right?
Well,
Now,
all J King can do here right now is... Yeah, he can just Ura, but not with Siberian Transfer.
No,
not really, not effectively.
Not. You may have to trade out into this Swordfish and Albacore to try and prevent lethal.
And Mud, probably the worst to draw in J King's entire deck.
You could try and do Siberian Transfer and trade the Siberian Transfer and this Brianx with 1 attack into the Swordfish, and you do survive on board. Just gonna...
I believe you can also final push to trade into the 4/6, and your Briansk Irregulars will die after... Wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. No, because it doesn't receive any damage from the bomber.
Oh, but...
Wait.
Uh-oh. Oh no, what's this?
Did J King have my mental slip as well?
Oh no. You know what they say, all Canadians think alike, and... Unfortunately here, the hive mind not working for J King, and Tang Tang able to take game 1 on Brit Air. Now, this was the matchup I imagine J King was least looking for, so gonna be glad that the Brit Air list is gone.
Yep. In these best of 5 sets, you can generally expect Brit Air to beat something. So it's not the end of the world to see it gone, but J King is probably pretty sad that he never got to play his Germany-Italy anti-aggro control deck into it.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the matchups you're looking for. The risk of bringing that, though, obviously, is you can just get blown out by a USA frontline list. And J King bringing his Jagro deck up against Tang Tang's Soviet ramp. Now, this is a very interesting matchup. Obviously, J King does have a lot of aggressive tools. Finding the Raiding Brigade in his opener is going to give him a way of dealing with Brance regulars. But Tang Tang obviously running a lot of anti-aggro tools, things like Bloody Sickles, lots of guards. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. What do you think each player is going to be looking for?
Well, I think both of these players are looking for their 1K04s. J King looking for his signal, and Tang Tang looking for his engineers. These cards are really huge in this matchup, and Tang Tang doesn't have really any healing apart from the engineers.
J King actually able to curve out quite nicely this turn. You do have options. I'd be tempted to just 20-second and draw 2 cards. It's quite nice to generate a large amount of draw here. And yeah, just going to be generating a lot of draw. Now, we imagine Tang Tang will want to deal with this front line.
Ooh,
However,
and the top deck
Confusion,
Confusion.
and Red Banner in hand. So can either Confusion trade out the board right now or wait to go for the combo. They're just going to trade away.
That Confusion is huge. Otherwise, Tang Tang wouldn't really have
but
much of a
in
way to
hand
deal
for
with this
J-King
engine.
now.
Oh yeah, Feigned is also huge.
J-King able to quickly dump a large amount of their hand. Create some issues here for Tang Tang. Now, Tang Tang does have guards. However, we know J-King has solutions to them.
Yeah, this
And
Raiding
this
Brigade.
Fifth Rangers is typically a really powerful card into more aggressive lists, but I find it can be a little bit redundant against Jagbro because they get so many units so quickly, and 4 HP I find isn't enough, where it often just dies before it gets to do as much as it would say against USA Frontline. So Fifth Ranger's going to come down, but you may see it.
Sorry to interrupt you. When a lot of these cards only cost 1 and you're paying 4 for your card to deal with 2 of them, often like you're coming up on value because you're only using 1 card, but you don't need value, you need time.
Exactly. And finding another Fifth Rangers. We may just see continued trades here. However, J-King will better do 10 damage this turn.
Well,
Sorry,
not quite.
He will not be able to do 10 damage this turn. He'll be able to do 5 damage this turn. Only the best here on the Innocent Bubbles cast.
It's okay. The math might not be quick, but we love you anyways, Bubbles.
The maths may not be there, but the heart is.
Exactly, and that's what counts at the end of the day.
My maths teacher didn't agree. Now,
It's
Tang
fine.
Tang has
We've
a
had
few
a.
options.
It's fine. It's not only the casters who have failed their math tests today.
Oh yeah, well, we won't talk about that until
We won't
later,
dwell.
and then we will bully him mercilessly.
Okay. Sounds like a plan to me.
Now, do you think you lead with the heroes or the spy ring?
I think you lead with the heroes because that allows you to play first rifles. And then if you don't find first rifles, you're still able to play spy ring to look for radar or US research.
Triple guards here. Now, do you take the rifles or do you take the armored train?
Um,
I'm
I
almost
think I'd
leaning
take
towards
the
armored train.
rifles.
You're going rifles? I suppose
yeah,
rifles
both are
is
good.
safer to a Type 94 top deck from J-King. J-King's able to find a Type 94. He's able to go double surprise attack and kill this armored train.
Ooh, wrong type.
Wrong
One
type.
off.
I feel like you just slam the feigned retreat this turn.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
I'm not sure what you obtain by not playing it this turn.
Well, you do get the opportunity to get the beef wagon out into the front line. You could trade out the armored train, although you're not able to do both of those things. I think J-King is just playing a Type 93 and the Feigned Retreat here.
Suspense. Gonna
Oh.
go for a trade. Okay, putting on the pressure.
Yeah, this looks pretty good.
Now, Tang Tang could go for a red banner play on this Shiden. But could also just put down a 6/6 guard, both of which seem pretty powerful. However, the 6/6 guard is once again weak to a Type 94 off the top.
Yeah, or at
Both-
this point, even a little weak to a Sendai as well.
You
Because
notice
J-King now has the credits. to
both
trade.
players are flexing their card backs. There's the
Absolutely.
the champions card backs.
How can you not?
How could
If
you
you
not?
get the card backs, you gotta show them off.
Tang Tang. Taking their time, no need to rush. Just gonna put down the 6/6.
And trading right away, maybe to play around desperate measures in some small capacity. Keep guard on both the 1/1s.
Signal making this feign retreat a lot more dangerous. However, I believe Tang Tang does have a couple ways to take to try and deal with it, right?
Like
You
the
could
flying
try and-
fortress.
you I more meant you get the 1 and 3 for the V1 flying bomb out of this research.
That might be a little more reasonable.
But it's only a 1 and 4. However, could go for the confusion red banner with that top deck.
Yeah, also quite reasonable.
So many reasonable plays.
But I like the unreasonable. Come on, B17.
I mean, you get a random 3K unit. Now, there's quite a few options here. You can get the AA gun, which is quite nice.
Even a Mito or a Shinhodo would be pretty decent in this
Shinoto.
spot.
Yeah. And anything which can trade into this unit in the front line. I believe there is it the Kumamoto or something? The
Yes.
0 operation.
Yep, Kumamoto is a
4/1.
0 operation cost blitz unit at 3 cost, a 4/1 body.
So there's quite a few blitz options here. Gonna be the Aichi, I imagine, though, knowing RNG. Okay. Well, that prevents healing. For anyone that doesn't know, this means whenever a HQ gains health, it loses health instead. So potentially the worst possible card for Tang Tang to get, because it means they will have to kill their own unit before they are able to get any healing.
Granted, I think J-King will have a big board to kill your own unit off of.
Now find the Aichi, which is a way of bypassing the guard, as well as a Sendai. And this is the power of Feigned Retreat and why it can even beat more anti-aggressive decks, such as Soviet Control. Because you just put out so much pressure with this Feigned Retreat.
Yeah, after this feint has come down, I'm struggling to see how Tang Tang wins this game. The just inevitability of Feigned Retreat is so powerful and so difficult to overcome.
Not the worst card to find off the top, but you do need to clear some of your support line before playing it. But this Shiden is such a big problem. We could see
Yeah.
the Shiden killed this turn, I believe.
Yes, you could, but that it still doesn't feel great because you have to leave the bomber on the board.
Yeah.
Out, and with
Actually,
these
no.
trades, that means the Shiden will not be getting killed. Which I think means this is going to be game. Unless Tang Tang plays Partisans, but that doesn't make any sense.
And there you go. Able to go for the Sendai on the guard. And Blitz, Fury out lethal.
Beautiful.
There you go, J King evening it out to a 1-1. Now there's going to be some difficulty with deck selection in this game 3 because we've got USA Frontline available for Tang Tang and we have Germany Control available for J King, which I think it's safe to say is quite a heavily favored matchup to this USA Frontline deck.
Yeah, and you can try to outthink your opponent here, but sometimes your opponent just flips a coin to decide on what to play. Both players know the matchups that they're looking for.
I mean, I've got to say, if I was J King, I would flip a coin. I've tried to do these 200 IQ calculations many times, and every time it backfires. I have a far worse than 50% hit rate with these matchups. And we find OTK against Soviet Control, not the worst matchup for either of them.
No, but it does mean Tang Tang will be able to guarantee the USA Frontline matchup into J King's Germany-Italy Control.
Quite strong openers here for both players. This 125th Rifle Regiment could pose a bit of a problem, especially if you're able to find a KV as well. You can very quickly burn down J King's HQ.
Yeah, and I'd like to see a 5th Rangers come down here, just because it applies so much more pressure than the 125th Rifles.
Certainly force J King to play a Brinks Irregulars as well.
Yeah. Alright, going for the 125th. This card, it essentially acts as a mini KV2, dealing 1 damage for each card that J King draws.
We see it already, putting in 2 damage just in the first turn of it being down. I mean, this OTK deck likes to draw a lot of cards. On the plus side, you do have a fair amount of healing as well as a GPW to finish it off.
Yeah, it definitely won't end the game on its own, but it will help you get there.
It will certainly force J King to think about the routes he takes as well.
Absolutely. We might even see just a first rifle to try to contest board a little bit. I'm not sure what else J King can really do.
Yeah, I
here.
certainly wouldn't hate it. I think I prefer it to the Brinks Irregulars, that much I'm sure of. However, he may just want to pass the turn back.
Yeah, he could be thinking of mind games that he wants Tang Tang to move up this 125th, so he's better able to try to trade into it. So he might not want to reveal the first rifles just yet. Ooh. That's a lot of value for Tang Tang. Double first rifles. If that hits something like a Bryansk Irregulars, Tang Tang's hand would be so much less potent here.
I think it's safe to say J King is never hitting the HQ with a Siberian this game. It's going to have to be Ura or Kayusha that finishes this.
Absolutely.
J King has multiple options. May just want to go for the draw engine soon. May just want to chuck down this first rifles as well. Now I'm curious if Scorched Earth into draw is a good move this turn, or do you want to wait until you have more options? I mean, this is your only draw card available at the moment. Do you really want to expend it on essentially what is a convoy?
Well, you do have a lot of draw in the deck, so I think using it as a convoy is okay. But ideally, you're using it more like a mobilization, which shouldn't be too hard to achieve.
Confusion plus Eurofactories actually might not be a terrible way of removing them with this guard. There's not going to be many more value targets to hit this game. but instead just looking to hammer it.
Yeah, getting the damage in this turn seems good.
Spiring, quite a nice option here for Jaking, something to pump these credits into.
And
He
we
has
can't see it
received
just
one, but he's holding it up in the air. There we go.
yet. Just so that we can't see it.
Put that down, Jaking. And finding the US research, actually, I think that's quite an important research to hit because it does give you this nuclear option.
Literally. Yeah,
Yeah.
it gives you an out, which you otherwise might not have in terms of answers. Although, of course, it is very slow to start going for these nukes to be able to deal with the board here.
Now, Tang Tang is able to stop off at synthetic rubber if they want and produce a much greater threat on the board. However, they could also wait a little bit and go for this sonar and just completely brick the credit efficiency of Jaking's hand and maybe just prevent him ever being able to find lethal.
Yeah, multiple good options. I would. I say I would love to see the sonar, but I know Jaking's not going to concede this match, so I'm not sure if I do want to see it because that could take a long time.
Gonna
see
go
the
for the Euro
classic-
factories into a
you see the-
free bomber. Do we take another first rifles? That'd be a lot of fun. You know, this would give me a little bit of a nostalgia back to this old first rifles where it used to duplicate itself.
Yeah, it would be a hilarious meme, but I can't imagine it's right. Take the number 3.
And Jaking trying to dump a fair amount of hand before the potential sonar comes out. You know what? I'm going to say it. Do any card from your hand, you know, it can be the Brilliance, whatever, go for the Bletchley. Go for the Bletchley, Tang Tang. You're live. It's the OCC finals. You're up against an OTK deck. Go Bletchley Park. See where it goes.
Just for the fun of it.
Would that be game losing? Probably.
Yeah, it's.
However,
you probably just die to.
to nukes.
Yeah.
I just
I
think
wonder
there's a
how much-
certain finesse to it, which, you know.
Yeah, I wonder how much damage this 125th has done so far this game.
Well,
Well, I guess the math isn't too hard. It came down on turn 4.
It came down on
but
turn
has
3.
Tang Tang ramped any?
Yeah, he ramped War Machine. It came down on turn 3 for Tang Tang.
Okay, but did he ramp after that?
Yeah, but you can use Jaking's credit slots to count the turns.
Oh, that's true.
I'll just let you
Um,
figure that out while I enjoy the match.
Okay. So, that's what probably it's 5 or 6 damage.
Roughly, it sounds about right.
It really felt like it should have been a lot more. No, but because of course Jaking's been drawing this whole time, so of course it's more.
All right, well,
What am I
someone is
saying?
going to have to go back and count because it's done 5 or 6 natural damage.
Yes.
Able
And
to turn
probably
their
4
9k research into another 9k research. Not normally what you see,
Not
but is on
exactly,
their
but-
way towards these nukes. Now, if Tang Tang rushes the front line, this gives JK a nice opportunity to play this delaying tactics alongside developing the nukes. And without much healing in their deck, if they can't close out this game, they could potentially just be blown out. There you go.
This is
Jaking gonna better develop nukes and push back this front line. And I'm starting to be mildly concerned here for Tang Tang because I don't see how Tang Tang is able to find a way to answer this properly unless they can just close out the game quickly. You could potentially, I believe Jaking's hand is 9 cards, so if you
Yeah.
partisans this first rifles, it does get deleted from existence.
Will you also get the grief war? Does it count as?
No, it will be removed from the battlefield. It's not a destruction.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. And you can move up everything else. And J King doesn't have the last little bit of burn in hand. He needs to find something like an Ura or a Katyusha.
And there it goes, on its way
Oh!
out. The Ura overdraw. Now you can go for the nuke into the Bloody Sickle to remove one of these guys in the front line.
Yeah, or just double nuke.
Gonna go for the double nuke. Tang Tang is that lethal for Tang Tang? Confusion plus Hellcat plus Stalin. Do exactly 12 damage. Or Hammer. Hammer works as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find exactly lethal sitting on a small 3 HP, but just about able to close it out. And Tang Tang going 2-1. And now J King is going to have to win the USA frontline matchup with their Germany deck at some point if they want to take this OCC final.
Yeah, incredibly close game there.
And there you go, Tang Tang with a 2-1 lead. And does have a very powerful deck to try and close it out with. Now, this matchup isn't great for Tang Tang facing into this OTK deck. There's a lot of Scorched Earth, there's a lot of Muds, there's a lot of delaying tactics. There's a lot of ways of really slowing down Tang Tang's game plan, and J King doesn't worry too much about this draw engine with these Shermans.
A lot of good cards right in the opening hand for J King for this matchup. Scorched Earth and Forced Rifles particularly. Very powerful.
You are going to need to find some draw. However, with Tang Tang having a Sky Train, this could potentially turn into a very clogged board very quickly.
I want to see the triple Jasko.
The Jasko Princer.
Yeah. J King opting not to keep First Rifles. I suppose deciding that the card's a little bit slow. And potentially weak into half track.
It's weak to half tracks, and like you do want to find these draw engines because you do need to keep drawing cards to make sure that you can answer threats as they appear.
Yeah, and probably hoping to find a convoy on turn 3 to carve out into and to find answers.
It's interesting to see J King dropping the Aerial Reconnaissance on turn 1. You do only run one of it in the deck, so I wonder if there's logic to holding it back sometimes. Tang Tang just deploying a lot of units on the board. It does leave himself open to a Scorched Earth. Zhukov, quite a nice find here. Helps you cycle through your deck, thinning your deck a little bit.
I will say that if you have played this matchup before on the USA side, it is so hard to ever effectively play around Scorched Earth. And you kind of need to accept that the Scorched Earths are getting really good value against you.
And yeah, there's not too much you can do about it. It's especially when there's 3 of them in a deck. But I'd like to see waiting a little bit from J King's perspective. You can wait for a Sherman to come down. You can wait for some more units to come out. You're not under much pressure to play it this turn. You can also potentially just wait and do some delaying tactics shenanigans. I mean, the delaying tactics here seems really nice. Bloody Sickle as well. Maybe worth dropping the Sickle just to cycle a card.
Yeah, certainly doesn't seem bad here. 1k to take out a 5-1 and draw a card.
Hey, I'll take that trade.
You don't necessarily need to do it this turn, though, if you want to delaying tactics and Scorched Earth. Let your opponent spend the credits first.
Oh, and the peer
Move
goes
up.
back to hand, pushes the guard to the front line, and goes for the Scorched Earth. Oh no! I really like this sprints to the front line, and this puts Tang Tang in such a difficult position. They have to spend 4 credits, effectively passing a turn.
Yep. And on the next turn as well, presumably.
The first rifles can also blitz up to the front line and just completely keep Tang Tang trapped in the support line. They are going to have their units start to die, however, it's just going to be such a slow move here. Possibly holding on the first rifles plan, though.
But J-King is going to need to find damage. He has a lot of time to find it, but not all the time in the world.
Just going to go for the HP reset, which means fortifications can be played. You do have a bit of an issue where if you play a fortification before going for the GPW, it can come back to bite you. There is a little bit of heal in Tang Tang's deck with this we can do it, but that's not a major concern here.
No, it mainly comes down to can J-King find
Ooh.
draw, and that's an incredible pickup. 4K Lend-Lease.
Able to completely refill the hand and find double delaying tactics.
Oh my
There is
goodness.
so much buy time in J-King's hand. Hellcat, a little bit of a problem, but not a huge issue. It is only 5 damage. You do have fortifications and first rifles. I would have been tempted to say you could have potentially done a first rifles trade before playing this bounce.
That is an option, although you can also move up first rifles because it is still Sukoved. And it would have 6 defense in the front line, which would be an awkward number for Tang Tang to deal with.
J-King not actually too far off lethal, right? Having an Ura and 2 final pushes in their hand, with the blitz out from the first rifles, which has free attack built in, you just need 1 more point of damage. If you're able to have the first rifles be killed, and then you're able to attack with the unit left over, which does do bonus attack against blitz units. These tanks now causing some problems. J-King really needing a Scorched Earth.
Ooh, a Katyusha. That is a little more damage, but you need the credits to operate it.
I would like to see the first rifles come out this turn.
And would you use the Ura and then hold the final pushes for the caddy?
You can do it. It's not a bad option. You can also pass with it down on with the first rifle surviving on board. You trade into, say, the 35T or the Whirlwind. I think I'd prefer the 35T just because of that free operation cost. I think is more relevant than the HP totals. Gonna Spyring. Sees a Royal Research.
That's probably the worst one to find here. The smokescreen and the credit slot would be pretty good. And dealing with the Hellcat removes 6, potentially 7 damage off the board.
J-King playing around no Blitzkrieg for Tang Tang. But Tang Tang is going to be able to do a lot of damage this turn. But J-King getting very close to a lethal now. Siberian transfer.
That's exact lethal, isn't it?
That's lethal. That's it. You go for the Siberian, the Ura, the double final push. And J-King finding exact lethal off the top, getting exactly for the second time with Siberian Transfer.
Man, this
And there
deck
you
stresses
go.
me out.
Oh, I am happy to see this deck in the finals, though, because it's a lot of fun. We now go to a Game 5, Germany Control versus Frontline. Not unwinnable, but most certainly Frontline favored. And I
Yeah.
think this is a hell of a way to finish this OCC just before rotation and Brothers in Arms drops.
Absolutely. And this matchup, it'll really come down to how many rootouts J King 7 can find is often how this matchup plays out, I find.
Not the worst hand for Jaking here. Finding a Rado, finding some strong early game units with this infantry and this JU-88. JU-88 obviously very weak to things like the half track, but if you're able to kill something like a Red Devils with this, it can become very, very problematic. Tang actually getting rid of their 1-drop, so no turn 1, which means J-King is going to better put up the Careless Talk and hit this Whirlwind on turn 2. Oh, just a moment.
There we go.
And I feel like maybe getting rid of the Greyhound might have been a mistake just because it does give J-King so much more room to move about in. And this is quite a slow start here for a USA frontline deck. It's going to better play around the countermeasure now because they do have the combat engineers and the Whirlwind, but J-King most likely going to be able to respond with an Errata and a Sudden Strike.
Yeah, and Tang, he was really aggressively looking for a copy of 32nd Infantry, the Chocolate Boys, because the value that those cards generate is so effective against Germany, Italy frontline in general, and against Careless Talk and From the Deep specifically. So I think this is really messing with his game plan right here.
J-King has a few options. The main issue of deploying this infantry is it does say to Tang, you are free this turn to do whatever you feel like. Tang can go for the combat engineers plus Whirlwind. Half track, a very decent find, but J-King will better just put this 5-5 back onto the board and into the front line if he desires.
Which looks like how it's gonna go down. J-King
Lots
finds
of
a Panther
Panthers.
G. Not
And if
really
you're
like
able
what
to-
you're looking for when
If
you
you're
already
able to
have
get a
one.
Panther, yeah, if you're able to get it into the front line, it can be nice when there's not a Hellcat about, but still, 2 of these is far too slow. 5-5 in the front line now, creating huge problems for Tang. And you do risk this getting buffed by a Man Nostrum, and then J-King just starting to smash away with your face and your units to his heart's content.
Yeah, but I think Tang doesn't really have any options apart from trading out with Hellcat and either the engineers or this tank.
I do agree. I think this is the sort of only option Tang has because you can't allow this to just continue in the front line.
Tang tentatively going for the line. Going for the engineers trade, which seems not too optimistic about how much control he'll have over the front line in the future going for this trade.
Now that he's seen this Hellcat come out, J-King deploying a Panther G, which is very intimidating here for Tang. Tang is able to get him for Sherman draw, but if there's a Panther G around, you know, you're sort of not really in an ideal situation, even with this card draw. root out, potentially a very strong fight. You are able to go sudden strike on this red that was in the front line and push to the front line, or just go for the Man Nostrum trade. Puts up the Careless.
However, Tang Tang has found the 30 seconds to finally be able to play around Careless Talk after all this time.
So it's a good thing there's nothing in J King's hand he just found to perfectly answer this.
Well, you don't need to play all your 30 seconds all at once. You
No,
can.
for sure. If you're able to buff them up with We Can Do It as well, then it does make it safe from this route out. Sure, losing the attack is kind of annoying, but you can still use them to generate draw with these Shermans as well as a Blitzkrieg winner.
Tang Tang can just go for the M4 Sherman draw, but it's a little bit risky because you run the risk of finding more 30 seconds. And a small misplay with the order. Playing 30-second last, losing the +1 health.
2-2. Yep. We may just see root out into trade. I think I'd prefer the root out first to make sure that the Panther is taking less damage from the trade. I don't think you're worried too much about the healing difference. Just gonna go for the trade. I don't think you want to push this to the front line, as it does enable this M4 Sherman to trade very nicely. But just gonna go for it anyway.
Yeah, I do find that a little strange as well.
J King able to get this We Can Do It down. However, these units are still very squishy. And we're second route out. We are getting to the point in the game where Tang Tang needs to start considering, how do I answer a Leopold?
Yes.
Currently, Whirlwind plus Control is a good answer for it, but it's definitely something you need to keep in mind. Going for the Lurking Danger, finding a Careless and a From the Deep.
Yeah, the
There
other
is the-
countermeasure being Decisive Defense and Shaking Stack.
There is the option, if you find Leopold on turn 11 or 12, to put it down alongside a countermeasure and just make sure that you're protecting it.
Yeah, that's a very good option, particularly against something like Hellcat, which Tang Tang has one more left in his deck. Ooh, but the Tactical Strike. We're talking about this as if J King already has Leopold in hand, which I don't know why.
He's got a Panther H, he'll find it.
Yeah, he knows how to top deck.
Now, we may see the double route out this turn. It does clear the board as well as leave a Panther around. Yes, on 1 HP, but 1 HP is enough to survive Greyhounds or Hellcats. Or not Hellcats, sorry, Greyhounds or Red Devils. Certainly would not survive a Hellcat. Yeah, I want to see the double route out this turn, personally.
It does play around the second We Can Do It. And leaves you in a pretty decent position. It is very sad to lose out on your Panther G for the most part, but
You're at such risk of being blown out by Blitzkrieg, by We Can Do It. There's so many things here which can just completely blow you out, and that J King's only answer to those would be the Leopold.
yeah. He keeps going back to that first route out. Looks like he's pulling
There
the
you
trigger.
go. Gonna clear the board. And
And
there's the Blitzkrieg off the top, just a little bit too slow. With no Shermans in hand, Tang Tang in a difficult position now. Gets hit by the Careless Talk on the not deploying the Greyhound first, prevents them from going for the trade.
And Tang Tang should have known about this Careless Talk because J King, he opted to not attack with the Erato first, so that would be a misplay of J King missing 1 damage if it wasn't to hold up Careless Talk.
And Pier coming down, buffing itself, going to be able to be hit by a line for a day and a Flam Panzer. J King finding all the answers, and this is really starting to look like J King's game. I'm not sure what Tang Tang's going to be able to find now to find solutions to this. You can clear the board and push the front line with this Panther. You could also just put down a Ju-88. I would just be worried about either the half tracks or the Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, I can understand why J King's a little hesitant to play this line for a day, because this is around the point in the game where 8/8 Fifth Rangers can be an issue, but he does have another copy of line for a day.
He does also have the From the Deep, which is quite a nice solution to these.
Yes, when you're able to hold it up.
Of course, of course. But generally, Tang Tang won't be playing more than 1 8/8 in a single turn, so you can Lion 1, hold it up for the other. Panzer H coming out. J King finding a piece of discard now, which is going to help him pressure lethal. In this case, yellow.
And this is starting to look really desperate for Tang Tang.
And when this half track comes out and gets destroyed,
And he just surrenders.
surrendering, scooping up,
He
and J
does.
King going 3-1. Able to take the win with the Siberian transfer list in his matchups. I think
Incredible.
yeah, that's certainly quite the send-off.
Berto, when you said that the Siberian transfer deck gives you like stresses you out, it fully was giving me anxiety. I'm just sitting there going, okay, J King has 4 health left. That's that's a win. Cool. I thought that was a phenomenal finals. I think we were treated to a great bronze series as well as a great finals here. Both those players playing well. Bubbles, to your point, that kind of fond farewell to the meta that once was, and a whole lot of changes coming forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly happy to see new decks on the way.
What, you're not tired of seeing frontline Jagro and
I
Brit
love
Air
it.
every
I love
month?
it. It's my favorite. I'm going to be playing classical game mode just to play those.
I thought so. I thought you would be the pioneer, starting all the community tournaments in classic mode. More OTK, please. I will take more of that though. That was an absolute blast to watch over this weekend. We do have one final treat though, right? We've got one more card reveal before we wrap up here, so let's bring it up before we take a final peek at the bracket. And here we have the 31e Algérien, the French card. Another Blitz card. Bubbles, more
So-
Blitz.
Yeah, more Blitz. I think this is a really powerful card. I think I'm just going to have to call it the 31 Algerians, because unfortunately, I don't think my mouth is capable of that. But yeah, this card seems really, really strong. The camel guys, with Blitz themselves, a 3k 3/3 with Blitz isn't far off like a Marines, which comes out first Marines very similar to this, but also adjacent non-French units get +2 attack. This is like the STK, this is like the Engineers. This is a really, really powerful buff to your side units. I'm wondering if we can see a Soviet France artillery deck using this alongside, obviously, you've got the KV Phony War combo, but then also the new Plan D, which gives everything bonus attack or bonus defense. I also think there's a lot of space to play around with this in other French ally decks, because 2 attack is a lot of attack. If you've got 2 units decked to this, you're getting 7 attack for 3 credits. I think this card is awesome. I'm excited to see the camels in action. I'm super excited for this. What about you, Berto?
Absolutely. I'm excited to see the menagerie of cards all coming together with the elephants, the camels, horses. I can't wait to see what we get next.
We're going to see zoo decks, but like actual zoo decks, not like we see in other card games, just all the animals. Bubbles, I also can't wait for you to be calling a match. And J King plays 31 Algerians on the board. 31 Algerians. But those are your 4 card reveals for the day. I also think it's funny that we J King won. We're like, yeah, whatever. He wins all the time. That's fine. Congrats and all that jazz. We got card reveals to do. We got card reveals to do.
Well,
Um,
I personally, I did not expect J King to make it to the finals when I saw the Siberian OTK coming in. That's a really hard deck to pilot, and I know J King's an incredible player, but he doesn't have a ton of experience on it yet. But even still, he was able to make it to the finals.
to be fair, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to preface this with the fact that J King is an infinitely better cards player than I, so I'm just going to make an observation, not a statement here. In the last few months, J King has brought pretty standard meta decks, and he like hasn't done particularly well. I don't think he's won an OCC in a minute. I could be wrong, but like brings the off meta stuff, and all of a sudden we have J King, taking home the crown of the June Clash winner. So maybe that's the future of J King. Just bring wacky off meta OTK decks, and that'll send him straight to the World Championships.
I'm ready for the 2-hour long video on Jaking's channel about the problems of Christo now. You've done it now. You've unleashed him on you. But it's interesting you say that, because I was the opposite. You say, you were confident in Jaking Badula's decks. I saw his decks. I thought these are great, but, no confidence in Jaking. I think he doesn't know how to play this game.
Thank you for taking the heat off me, Bubbles. Now it's going to be the the Bubbles is a Clown video series coming
Hey,
through.
that's you can see that on all sorts of YouTube channels. That's anything which I'm on. It's Bubbles as a Clown.
Well, I will say congratulations to J King. That is 25 OCC points. That is $250 there as well. Let's bring up the final bracket. Let's see where everybody finished, because Tang Tang not walking away empty-handed. 18 points for Tang Tang. And $150 third place. Of course, Z Yang gets 100 USD, 15 points. Fourth for Ozzy gets 12 points. Anybody finishing after fifth gets 8. Anybody after 8 who did not make it here today still walks away with 4 points. So keep your eye on the KARDS OCC points page. They're going to be doing the updates, I'm sure, over the next couple days. So you'll see exactly where everybody stacks up with only one OCC clash left to go before the ultimate. So thank you, Berto. Thank you, Bubbles. An absolute pleasure. Great job, Spooz. Darkness, Starry. We had an absolute full cast today. Big thank you to all the players for putting on a fantastic OCC clash. Most importantly, thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in, putting up with the technical difficulties, hanging out with us for 2 days. Stay tuned, because next week we have got the OCC. Not the OCC at all, the Cards Open. Jeez, I've been saying OCC for 2 days. We've got the Cards Open coming. We have got the podcast coming. Most importantly, we have Brothers in Arms coming on June 27th. You can get access to the cards early. Check out the shop. You see the big smile on the faces of everybody when we start talking expansion, so stay tuned. Next month, we're going to have our next OCC clash, the first with Brothers in Arms.